кров у серці, як дизель в двигунах. Важкий кевлар не гріє, він душу опіка. Атаку сухопутні ідуть війська. Піхота йде, вони безстрашні, піхота рве ворожу пащу. Ми маємо йти міцніше сталі, віддати честь нашій державі. Війська ідуть, летять снаряди, небесний грім, несуть армади, війська землі. Міцніше сталі, за нами мир і честь держави.
Пройду неухильно тяжкий шлях войны мерзотной и кривавой на наших волотных пляжах. Устыми мстях шляхетной славы я Калиновский наш кастусь. Мне приклад так и лёс Литвина, я вызволяю Беларусь. Про вызволение Украины як тур клянусь оборонить. У пекле битвы побратима. Наш гонор вечно будет жить у памяти моей родимы. Обовязково повернусь, коли у битвах не загину. Уродный край у Беларусь, про вызволение Украины, уродный край у Беларусь, про вызволение Украины.
Покинув так давно, цілу Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 160 of the news.
And of course, welcome back over the Monday break. Y'all may have noticed that, of course, the last short summary video went out on Sunday, and I've got to tell you, it has been rather nice, especially with the things that we've had going on in the background, to have a little bit of an extra hour and a half's worth of break. Believe me, due to what happened over the past day, and today for us, has been incredibly strenuous and difficult, but we've been able to get through it, and we're back to report the last 48-hour news to all of y'all. And I can't wait to say it because we've had some pretty interesting news today, not only in Ukraine, but we've had a small amount of follow-up news on a story that we covered across the entire world in Taiwan, which we will, of course, cover first because it's a very small side note today, which has not had major developments. But with that in mind, we have seen the Ukrainians taking ground in the places that you wouldn't believe. In fact, we've not seen the Ukrainian counterattack make any ground whatsoever in the Kherson area over the past 48 hours, but we have seen the Ukrainians making small gains in other areas of the front lines, which has been completely unexpected, and we're of course going to be covering tonight because it's showing that the Ukrainians may have been doing the entire Kherson counterattack as a ploy, or it may not be doing well, because one thing that's leading me to think that is that the HIMARS attacks destroying the bridges were indicating that this was going to be going in a very serious direction, where the Ukrainians would most likely begin a full-on counterattack and start taking the ground and pushing the Russians towards the destroyed bridgeheads. But they didn't. So either the Ukrainians have pulled off one of the biggest, I guess you could say, deceptions of the war, or the counterattack has petered out. I'm not really sure which one. We'll have to see what the next few weeks hold for us in the future to see what actually happened. But still, let's get into tonight's schedule, and let's talk about what we have in store. To start off tonight, we're going to be starting off with the side story in Taiwan. We have gotten a little bit of a follow-up. The speaker and her delegation have arrived in the nation of Taiwan, the first time the Speaker of the House has visited Taiwan in 25 years, which is a landmark decision by the Speaker and the delegation that traveled along with her, and also a huge mark in U.S. foreign relations with the Taiwanese, and kind of in opposition to the Chinese, I guess you could say, foreign interests. We'll then be moving on out of Taiwan and right into the news that counts for the night, which is Ukraine. We'll actually be starting off in the location unknowns tonight, which we have a decent amount of, somewhere around 11, I believe, and we'll cover all of those. And after we cover all of our location unknown news, since we have such a decent amount of it, and before we get to the Kharkiv area, we're going to take a quick pause to go through a question segment. We'll answer 3 questions from the chat during that segment, and after that, we'll then be moving on into the Kharkiv and northern Donbass area. After we cover the Kharkiv and northern Donbass area news, along with Donetsk, I forgot to include that, so pretty much the entirety of the Donbass, we'll then be moving down to the southern front and the Kherson area and covering the news as well. But before we get there, we're of course going to take another pause to answer another 3 questions from the chat, and after that, we'll continue on with the news uninterrupted for the rest of the night, cover everything else, and then go to the website of the President of Ukraine to listen to President Zelensky's speech for day 160, and then that will round out the news segment for the night, and we'll move into a question segment where we're going to answer all of the super chats and as many live chats as possible. I would like y'all to know that sending in super chats does support this channel, but you do not have to always send in a super chat to have a question answered. You can just @Enforcer or @Enforcer Matt, and once we get through all of the super chats to recognize everyone who helps us to keep the stream running and keep the gears turning, we'll then answer as many of those as we can. So send one in, because it might be one of the ones we answer. And of course, the more questions we have, the better ones we have as a selection to pick from. So without further ado, let's hop over to Taiwan real quick, where we do have a little bit of a continuation to the story. A few days ago, we did cover this, and it seemed that the Speaker of the House, along with the delegation, may be traveling to Taiwan, and the Chinese then threatened that if they take a trip to Taiwan to visit there in a diplomatic fashion, they would counteract with strong resolve. Apparently, the United States didn't take that seriously, thankfully, and the Speaker's delegation and the Speaker herself arrived in Taiwan today to visit with the Taiwanese government. The Chinese have immediately stated that they are going to be acting with strong resolve, and it appears that they're going to be starting military live training exercises off the coast of Fujian. At the same time, the Taiwanese have also said they're going to be conducting artillery and air drills as well, which puts us on a little bit of a tense note. Unlike Ukraine, however, which started off the war without really any indication that things were going to become serious, the Taiwanese are pretty much mirroring the Chinese in their escalation of force, par for par. So if anything does happen, the Taiwanese will already be conducting drills and will be ready to go at a moment's notice. We'll of course keep an eye on this situation, and also we did have to take a news article today. We rarely ever do that, but this kind of event is very hard to get on video. So we did get an article from Taiwan News today, a news organization from Taiwan, speaking about the speaker's trip. We can see that they had touched down at the Taipei Songshan Airport in Taipei, the capital city of Taiwan, and that lets us know that they are certainly there, which is very good to see, and it's good to know that the United States will not be bullied by foreign countries into what they can and cannot do in terms of foreign relations. With that, we're now going to be moving into Ukraine, and we're now going to be covering the location unknowns, and we have some really interesting ones today. We're going to start off on day 159 and move on to day 160. Just for some of our newer viewers, all of these dots are color coded. So depending on the day of the week, it'll either be green for, I believe, let me think. Whatever. Y'all get the picture. Today is dark gray. Yesterday, which was Monday, is bluish color. And so starting off with our first bit of location unknown news, we can see the Ukrainians using a javelin to hit a tank. And let's see this video here. Let's see if we can get that graphic quality up. We can see the javelin taking flight and heading towards a Russian tank. Now, this tank on film is incredibly far away, and I think this is where the javelin gets its name. We see the javelin is still traveling. We haven't seen an explosion in the distance yet. And there it is. You can see the small little speck of an explosion, letting us know that the javelin did hit a tank, and let's see if it explodes or brews up afterwards. We can see some black smoke coming off of it, which lets us know that that tank was destroyed. Interestingly enough, we can see a T-72B of the Ukrainians sitting right here in front of this javelin crew, so very interesting. I didn't actually see that the first time I saw the video, but one thing I can tell you is that it's nice to see, regardless how that Russian tank was knocked out, that it was taken out. Each tank wiped out from the Russian army is another tank they will not be able to replace. At this very moment in time, they've run so low on tanks that they're now pulling out T-62Ms out of their inventory, and they've been doing this for a pretty long while now, about an entire month. And so each T-72, each T-80, each T-64 that is knocked out is going to be replaced by something far older, either an older variant of that tank, or it's going to be replaced by a tank that isn't even in service with any Russian units right now. And so with that, great thing to see, and a great way to start off our location unknowns tonight. Moving on to the next one, we can then see a, well, I can't really say these words on YouTube. We have figured that out. YouTube has already told me I can't. But we can see a drone that likes to get up close and personal, helping Russian soldiers to take a nap. And of course, we know Russian soldiers are exhausted across the entirety of the front lines, and breaks are well-deserved, and the Ukrainians dispense them like party favors. When you see these Russian forces, these may be DPR or LPR soldiers, we're not entirely sure, but it appears they're in some kind of a drainage ditch, and they've set up a small camp here. We can then see the drone flying towards them, or at least flying around where the area they are at. And now we can see it guiding itself downwards towards the ground and slamming into that drainage ditch. Now we can see a yellow circle being outlined on the video, where we can see, can't really see much. We see a little bit of something white down there. It looks like a smoke cloud. We can't see someone running. And now I've realized, for some reason here, I need to explain this for a moment. I thought we were looking at clouds right here. This was very disorienting to me a second ago. I thought these were dark clouds and this was the sunlight coming through, but these are actually the remnants of burned out wheat fields and the little wheat that remains within them. So, a little bit of a correction there. I was a little bit disoriented the first time I saw this and I was trying to piece it together as we were watching. We can now see what appears to be mortar rounds landing near this drainage ditch. It doesn't look like it's going to be a good day for the Russians. Very interesting to see. Of course, we cannot assess the damage that was directly caused on the Russian forces, but considering that the drone went down there and appeared to have given several people a nap, I'm going to assume that the damage must have been somewhat serious, and that a lot of people ended up taking naps. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can then see the Russian BMP-2s and 3s being destroyed by an M777. BMP-2s are largely a dime a dozen, kind of like a BMP-1, but BMP-3s, on the other hand, there are only a few hundred examples of those in service with the Russian military, something around 500 of them. We can now see the Ukrainian artillery coming down where these BMPs are being stored. The artillery continues to rain down, and we're just waiting for the follow-up footage showing the destroyed BMPs. And there we can see one of the destroyed BMPs, a BMP-2, and we can also see two other vehicles inside of what appears to be this large garage building, maybe a mechanic shop at one point in its history. I'm going to assume that this one is a BMP-2, and that one may be a BMP-3, but it's really hard to tell. We can tell that this one out here was certainly a BMP-2 based off of how the turret ring is closer to the front, and the front, at least if we're assuming this is the front, appears to be more flat and angular than the BMP-2s, which is pretty distinct if you ever take a really good look at it. But with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that Ukrainian artillery was able to knock out 3 APCs in a single spot. APCs are not cheap. They cost around $500,000 a piece on average, and so what we just saw is 1.5 million US dollars worth of equipment get destroyed by a short artillery barrage. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians coming under barrage themselves. Of course, wars are a difficult thing to deal with, and on occasion, the Russians, of course, bombard Ukrainians. As far as we know, statistically, based off of the numbers we've been able to find, it appears that the Russians bombard the Ukrainians in terms of the numbers of artillery rounds fired far more frequently and far more heavily than the Ukrainians do in turn. But this does not demoralize the Ukrainians at all, and in fact, they are rather safe inside their trenches due to the overall inaccuracy of Russian artillery that we've been able to see on film. And so with that, here's a video of an artillery shell landing close to a Ukrainian trench. You see him getting down and getting in just in the nick of time as an artillery shell literally exploded right outside of this trench just a couple of yards away. And with that, pretty close, pretty harrowing stuff, actually. And it's interesting to see that that soldier knew that it was on the way. I think he may have heard one of the artillery shells explode in the distance, and his, I guess you could say, sixth sense kicked in, and he knew that if he stayed in that same spot, it might get him. So luckily, he was on his toes and thinking incredibly smart, because if he wasn't, he may have been the next unfortunate casualty. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Russians once again being hit. So we can see there was a BMP-3. Let's look at this here real quick. A BMP-2 and a BMP-3. Interestingly enough, this one has it painted on camouflage. That's actually quite rare. We now see this video showing us around the Russian forces, and we can see a small little fire started over here on the right side of the screen, and it appears that the crew just abandoned that BMP-3. We can then see a Russian tank moving down the road. I can't really tell you what kind. It looks like it may have been a T-72B3. And now the artillery is coming in on what appears to be the same area. The crew is now running from the exact same tree line they ran into. And it now looks like the BMP-3 just got hit dead on. Hopefully the smoke clears so that way we can make sure. Unfortunately, we're not able to tell if the BMP brewed up or not, but we could see that an artillery shell landed directly alongside it. BMPs, as a series of armored personnel carriers, have paper-thin armor, and the armor on these armored personnel carriers is so thin that a 50 caliber can punch right through it and straight into the crew. So, assuming that artillery shell hit incredibly close, and usually shrapnel does travel at a very high velocity and can punch through a decent bit of armor, I would assume that BMP has most likely been damaged beyond the point of repair and is most likely going to be abandoned there, considering that the crew had already left it and started running away. Unfortunately, we could not confirm the damage that was caused to it on film, but based off of that assumption, we're going to take the broad general idea that that may have been a kill. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can then see the Ukrainians have retaken ground, some Russian trenches as a matter of fact. Unfortunately, we do not know what area of the front line this was taken in, but it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are making ground and retaking positions that the Russians have been holding for who knows how long.
Засмітили всю посадку. Ну, звичайно, як вони себе поводять, так вони і воюють. Бруд. Везде все воняет. Здесь русский мир, здесь Русью пахнет.
Place seems to be in somewhat tatters.
Катки, везде залишили купи бруду.
You can see him continuing to walk through what appears to really be a garbage dump instead of a Russian post. But then again, that would be... That's a lot to say. That's like saying that the Russians were not already making it a garbage post by them just being there. But we can now see that after they retreated, they left some remnants behind to let the Ukrainians know that Russians definitely were in this position.
Вот это русский мир. Щоб ви розуміли, шановні, що таке русский мир. Вот він. Настоящий русский мир. Русская армия.
Good lord. Okay, now I gotta say this. Let's go back and look at that for a second.
Русский мир.
I don't know about you, Matthew, but this looks a lot like the beaches in Rio de Janeiro before they cleaned them up. Like, there's just garbage everywhere.
That is absolutely trashy, I say.
That's true. And another thing that's crazy to me is that how in the world, because it looks like there's actually some entrenchments further down this trash heap, how in the world did the Russians live in this? They probably were catching diseases from their own filth.
I can't even see the entrapments.
Сильно непереможна. Просто жахіття якесь.
Now, a drone wouldn't have a hard time picking this up because it's already easy enough to see where dirt has been disturbed because you have these, of course, you know, just orangish or brownish piles of dirt just sticking around and trenches that have a little bit of a contrast because of the shadows and stuff. But with that amount of garbage and how white all of it is, they've literally made a giant crosshair on this trench that if a drone was to fly over, it would be obvious that Russian soldiers were sitting in that trench.
Да, на жаль, сьогодні не передати, бо дуже смердить.
And he's saying, I can't tell you how it smells. I bet you it smells like a landfill.
Бачите, що тут додати нічого. Жили як свині. Навіть мусор в одну кучу складувати не могли.
Oh my god, it just doesn't end. It's everywhere. I mean, like, everywhere the Russians stood or walked, it's where they were. It's even across the street. When you see a dugout here for a vehicle.
Георгиевські ленти на фоні сміття і лайна. Як я говорю,
Good lord. That's the end of that location unknown video. One thing we can get from it, though, is that the Russians are trash, both figuratively and literally. If they go somewhere and they stay in a trench for long enough, we don't even know how long they were in those earthworks, they will make it into a landfill. So not only are the Ukrainians going to be the world exporters of scrap after the war, thanks to the Russians, they're also going to be the world exporter of trash. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of location unknown news from day 159 before we move on to day 160. And so our last bit of news is the Ukrainians, from what we can tell, hammering in a sign telling everyone to look out for mines. And I'd have to say, I think they're getting the message across good and well in this video, and I'll let y'all see why. So, without further ado, here's a video of the Ukrainians making a minefield. Does anyone see anything wrong with this picture, or is it just me? Does that not look like a hammer? Now this is how you let people know that you're not afraid of the mines you're laying down, and this is also how you make a viral video. I don't know, you know they probably had some kind of a hammer around. I bet you they just did this for the video, and of course this is entirely safe. You can see that the actual, I guess you could say, pressure plate that is put within the mine is not actually screwed in, so it's not like it's going to explode. You can load these things into trucks and drive them down dirt roads, jostling and bouncing off of each other, and as long as they are not armed, they will not explode. But this is one of the craziest videos I've seen, and as the war keeps on going, it seems like Ukrainian soldiers are getting pretty bored, and they're starting to do crazy things like blowing up mines with sticks, and also hammering in signs with mines. You know, this is actually the exact opposite of what we saw the other day, because we saw them hitting a stick with a mine. Now they're hitting a mine with a stick. Well, actually, I got that backwards. Yesterday, they were hitting a stick with a... Wait a minute. They were hitting a mine with a stick.
With a stick.
Yeah, there we go. They were hitting a mine with a stick. Now today, they're hitting a stick with a mine. You know, this reminds me almost of like a Bugs Bunny cartoon or something like that, you know, where Bugs Bunny would be hammering in the sign with a mine, and then he would drop it, and the next person would come up and pick it up and slam it down on the sign, and it would blow up. With that, that's the end of the video, but a pretty funny one at that, and I think we get the picture that there's definitely mines somewhere in the area, and I think he may be holding it. So with that, we're now moving on from the day 159 location unknown news, and we're now moving on into the day 160 news, which we have a much smaller amount of. Most of the day 160 news was actually located to an area. So moving on to our first bit of news, we can see an improvised grad. Now, if the Russians had done this, I would be laughing, considering that they had tried to, I guess you could say, give the message to the world that they were a military force to be reckoned with, using nothing but T-14 armadas and sci-fi stealth aircraft, but they ended up using ghetto bombs and such things from drones. So, with that in mind, I have to give credit to the Ukrainians because they never tried to make themselves out to be a force to be reckoned with, or any kind of a killer military that could take on the strongest nations in the world. They didn't do any of that. And so when this war started, I expected them to have to improvise some stuff. And I have to say here, this is one of the most interesting examples we've seen. They've taken 3 guide tubes from an old BM-21 Grad that they captured from the Russians, took them off of that one, and then installed them onto a Toyota Hilux, and they're using these 3 tubes to fire off just 3 rockets. So here's the video of some crazy Ukrainian ingenuity. And unlike an ISIS truck, this one did not explode or catch on fire in the process of doing that. And so it looks like the Ukrainians have a pretty decent bit of technological knowledge, and they're also pretty handy with coming up with improv weapons. We've seen them make improv buggies, we've also seen them make these kinds of grads, and they keep on trying to make do with what they have, and also ask for more high-tech equipment from the West. And while we're trying to provide as much as we possibly can, it's good to see that the Ukrainians are trying to fill the gaps they still have in some ways, and that they have the ingenuity to do it. Hopefully that is an effective weapons system. We're not really sure. We're not sure how accurate that is, but still, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are thinking on their feet. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some Russian MLRSs firing at Ukrainian forces. Now, this footage was taken from some kind of an infrared system, it appears. So here's the video. We can see the rockets taking flight in the distance. And this is apparently taken from a drone. You can now see the rockets traveling upwards. And of course, they're going to be coming back down, as we can see right there. There's one of them that is returning back to the surface, it seems. We now see the rockets returning back to the ground. This kind of gives you a start to finish a look at how long it takes for a grad barrage to be launched and then hit its supposed target. The only problem with this video, and I'm going to have to pause it right here. If this was a Ukrainian video, they would have shown us in the infrared footage the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces and where they were, and they would have clearly showed us that this barrage was landing on actual Russians. In the typical Russian way, they never show us if there's Ukrainian forces in this video, in this tree line, or anywhere in the area. So as far as we are concerned in this video, they are hitting nothing. We don't see anything on film. We don't see any soldiers, any vehicles. We don't see any fires after the barrage. All we see is a Russian grad battery firing at a tree line and hitting, from what we can tell, nothing. And as you can see, based off of the thermal footage, when these rockets explode, they cause a bright red signature on this camera. And as you'll see, once these actual explosions subside, there are no fires on the film. The explosions are the only source of heat we get, so no ammunition has exploded. There's no ongoing fires from vehicles or anything like that. As far as we can tell, it hit absolutely nothing. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, and from that, a little bit of Russian propaganda. And we're now going to be seeing a sniper having a little bit of fun, specifically a Ukrainian sniper. And so, without further ado, I don't think I need to explain how they're going to be having fun. Here's the video. We can see them looking at a Russian, and it appears that they just dispensed a free nap. We can now see them doing it once more, and it looks like someone else just got another nap. We can now see what may be one of these sniper crews. It appears that they're attached to an air assault brigade, since that is the badge of the air assault. But let's take a look here. Now, the graphics on this video are not that great, sadly, but let's see if we can tell, or at least have everyone in the comments, tell us what kind of sniper rifle that is. That may be, if I'm taking a guess, at least in caliber, a 50 caliber or a 338. I feel like it's most likely somewhere around the 338 range, but then again, I could be wrong. So let me know in the live chat what y'all think this gun is. It looks pretty interesting to me, and hopefully it is a pretty decent sniper. We're not really sure which caliber it uses, though, sadly. But with that, we're now going to let this video round out again. We can tell which weapon this guy has, and it looks like an AR-15. Well, maybe an M4. That'd probably be what it actually is who in the world's going to take a semi-automatic AR-15 over a select fire M4? But then again, I could be wrong on that too, because some of y'all in the live chat, unlike me, know every single make and design of gun ever, and I'm sure someone's about to say something like, this is a Colt and Wesson rare model of, M4 XM5538. Only 20 of them were made, and they fire a rare 323 caliber round. I'm sure that someone's about to say that, so just let me know what this one is in particular as well.
Enforcer, did you say Colt and Wesson?
Yes, because I was saying it was a rare, it was a rare joint effort in between the two, because there's always the rare one out there, like the Penderson rifles. If y'all know what I'm talking about in the live chat, you know. So with that, Matthew sitting there calling me out too on my example of something that's outlandish, and he's like, "Isn't that outlandish?" And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. But anyways, we're gonna let that video end, and some pretty interesting guns being used by the Ukrainian sniper crews, and actually a pretty big sniper team from what we can tell here. Let me go back. Wait a minute, correction. It's not a big sniper team. It looks like they just have the sniper and maybe the spotter. For some reason, I thought it was a team of 3 for a second, but it looks like a team of 2 with a cameraman. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a massive Russian barrage. Once again, the Russians are showing, well, the Russians are barraging a Ukrainian town, and we can actually see it landing right in front of this apartment building. We don't know where this is, and it does look like it's a little bit of old footage, but we've never seen it before, and I wanted to show it to y'all because this is evidence, and I'm saying it's old footage because the trees do not have any growth on them, and also the grass is brown, letting us know that this was most likely taken in the early times of the war, like February or March. But still, I want y'all to see this video because we've never seen it before here on this channel, and this artillery barrage gets dreadfully close. It actually it wipes out a pretty much middle of a block in between these two apartment buildings. And so with that, here's the video. You see that rocket land literally in the middle of this little block area. I guess you could call it a park.
Все живы, все здоровы.
And now we can see the damage.
Харков. Харков. Ассам Касав. Найди кшикти.
The damage speaks for itself, and we can see once again something very interesting about this film, and I also like to point out a contradiction. Russian artillery strikes on Ukrainian positions. Where was the Ukrainian military in this entire video? I did not see them. When we look out this window here, when we get the wide view at the very beginning, is there any Ukrainian military trucks in the middle of that block? Are there any Ukrainian soldiers there? No. Are there any Ukrainian soldiers anywhere in the video? Are there any Ukrainian vehicles, military vehicles, anywhere in the video? No. What we see is citizens living in their apartment blocks, and of course this is early on in the war, so I'm kind of speaking on a soapbox here, but this is something that they still do to this day, is that pro-Russian supporters will say that these barrages are being targeted at Ukrainian military positions. But when you watch the video, these positions are nowhere in sight. In fact, there's no evidence of the Ukrainian military ever even being here. It's all citizens living inside their apartment blocks and their cars parked outside. When we get this shot here to the left for a second, we see the barrage happening just further down the way. There's no military vehicles here either. This entire place is devoid of the military, yet the Russians are barraging this place filled with citizens in every single apartment room, in every single apartment building, and pro-Russian supporters will have you believe that they are wiping out Ukrainian forces in this video, but all they're doing is killing and wounding Ukrainian citizens that have nothing to do with the actual war or the continuation of it. It's a sick thing, it's deplorable, it's detestable, and this gives you another example that this has been going on ever since the Russians threw a fit, that their quick push through Kharkiv failed, and their quick push down towards Kyiv got halted right outside of the city. After that, they then started to pull off these kinds of tactics directly targeting the Ukrainian populace, and this stuff still goes on to this day. Now we see it being conducted by artillery barrage to a pretty decent rate. A lot of cities have been razed at this point in the eastern part of Ukraine, but they've now developed a strategy of using ballistic and cruise missiles to target cities well behind the lines, just so that way they can keep up the levels of terror all across the country and pretty much commit, I guess you could call a small-scale genocide wherever they can. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from this last bit of location unknown news, another sick example of a Russian attack. And we're now going to be moving into our first question segment, and after we answer those 3 questions from the chat, we'll then be moving on into the Kharkiv and Donbass region and covering the news there. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, so it's now time for our first question segment, but we have 2 orders of business to get to first. Up first, we have a poll that I put up about 30 minutes ago, and the question was, do you believe China will retaliate in severe form to the U.S. Speaker of the House's visit to China? And it looks like 19% of you said yes, and 81% said no. And for me, I would have to agree with the 81%. I think I saw some headline today saying that China blocked some snacks from going to Taiwan or something, so that's not very severe. But they could do something in the future. That's not saying that they wouldn't. but I would agree with the 81%. And Enforcer, what is your take?
I'd actually have to agree with the 81% as well, because considering that the Chinese government made an official statement saying that they didn't say they would, but they said we may shoot down the speaker's plane. And that was a massive point of news. I actually didn't believe that when I heard it, because I was like, are they really giving out threats like that? And it turned out they did. And in fact, in a phone call with the U.S. president and the premier of China, they also handed out some pretty heavy-handed threats about the speaker traveling to Taiwan then as well. And out of all of that posturing and strong-handed and strong-arm talk, the speaker arrived in Taiwan today, and they did none of that. They didn't shoot down the speaker's plane. All they have done is said, we're going to do what the North Koreans do whenever they throw a hissy fit, which is to start having live fire exercises somewhere near to Taiwan. And in North Korea's instance, they would say something like somewhere near the South Korean border. So, by and large, I would have to agree with you all at this point. I think this may have ended up being nothing, and the Chinese just freaked everyone out and wanted us to be freaked out about what they may possibly do. But of course, as I said before, they expand in a way that's non-militarily. They expand in an economic way. And so I said it would be highly unlikely, although the threats started getting incredibly serious, and much like the Russian-Ukraine situation, when the threats got a little serious, a war immediately followed, and so we were making sure to cover this news, just in case if anything was to come out of it. Luckily, it looks like a crisis has been averted for now, and hopefully it will continue to be this way into the coming weeks, and this will just subside into a tense moment internationally, and a footnote, maybe in a very niche history book somewhere in the future. And so with that, I hope we've addressed that poll, and we're now going to move on to answer 3 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew? Oh yeah, also, what was your second point of order? Because I don't think you got around to that.
Yes, and the second point of order was actually the Morse code. We had both C-Fay and Mark Hodges figure something out here. They said that tonight's Morse reads, and they list off a bunch of letters and numbers, and they say Slava Ukraine. I'm thinking that the Morse message is a polybus cipher, maybe. I'm working on it as we travel around the world with you tonight.
Well, I thank you so much for deciphering that message. And as I say decipher, some of our Morse code readers will say it's not really deciphering, it's more like reading for people who know Morse. And that I would agree to. But tonight we've done something a little special, and I thought y'all would really enjoy this. And if this works out, we are going to start expanding this into a broader horizon that I haven't even told Matthew about, and I won't tell y'all about until we see if this is able to work or not. What we have done tonight is brand new, entirely special, and something, of course, that we've never done before. Our message has been enciphered in the Enigma code. And it's not the message that was played during the sirens. That is deciphered. The actual message itself was played earlier in the stream during our number station broadcast of the Morse code, and it is in the Enigma letter and code blocks. If you are able to find out how to use that cipher that was in the sirens to decode that other message, you will be able to understand what it says. This is the first time that we've ever used the Enigma code machine on stream, and so I hope y'all enjoy it, and I hope we see a lot of people having fun trying to decipher it. Just to let y'all know what I'm thinking, if this does succeed, and a lot of people start getting into this, we might start to do something like a merchandise giveaway through the Enigma cipher, where it's a one-time, like, get a sweatshirt or a hoodie free or something like that, so that way you can go through and try and figure out. We might only do that once because so many people don't know how to read Morse, and so we only have like 3 Morse code readers and probably decipherers who could translate the message, and then they just sit there and get like 50 shirts. So with that, hopefully that works well, but a very cool thing that we tried to do tonight, and I hope y'all all enjoyed as well. And so with that, we are now going to finally move on into the questions, and with that, what do we have, Matthew?
All right, and up first, we have a super chat from White Lightning 777, who puts in a $30 donation and says, how long-range HIMARS, has long-range HIMARS been confirmed on the battlefield? What targets have been hit so far with those?
We haven't been able to confirm long-range HIMARS on the field yet. We still know that they have the, I believe, M40 or M41 versions of the rockets. They're not rockets, actually. Those are missiles. We don't know about the Ukrainians getting ATACMS yet. We know that they are supposedly in consideration, or they're being sent over. The story we've been getting is a little bit unclear on that. But if the ATACMS do arrive in Ukraine, we will know because their targets will start to extend far beyond the current HIMARS range. For example, if, say, Berdyansk gets hit by something, then we'll have a pretty good idea based off of the distance. Let's see if the Ukrainian front line is somewhere around here, because we're assuming it is. This part of the front line is inaccurate, but we haven't got any video or picture evidence to affirm where it actually is. But assuming that is around 90 miles away to Berdyansk and 70 miles at the shortest, an ATACMS missile would be needed to hit Berdyansk or anything within it. And so if we see targets like that being hit, or, for example, if for some reason this is not included in the do not attack Russia line of thinking, if we start to see targets being hit within Crimea at all, that will let us know that the ATACMS missiles have arrived in Ukraine and are being used by the HIMARS batteries. But at this moment, we're not entirely sure about that. I hate to say it, but we've been getting some mixed news on whether the ATACMS are being sent or not. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, White Lightning 777, and thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel to keep on running, and you've been a longtime member of the Lee Spring Army. Also, since we're answering questions right now and we have a little bit of a breathing room to just speak about some stuff, I forgot to tell y'all something big, really big. We actually had a lot of people enjoy our Lee Spring Army merch. And so many people have enjoyed it and so many people have asked for it to come back that we have, in fact, brought it back to life, but in a little bit of a different pattern. In fact, we're going to pull up the Enforcer store just so that way I can show y'all the brand new merch. And this merch is not limited edition. This is a permanent store item. We put LSA on both a t-shirt and a hoodie. You can get these in multiple colors. They do not say property of the Lee Spring Army. That will permanently remain a limited edition run of these kinds of shirt designs. But we did throw on some more that can come in all kinds of colors: green, black, light blue, dark blue, gray, dark gray. I kind of call this Ukrainian green because this looks a lot like the color of shirt that Zelensky and a lot of soldiers in the Ukrainian army wear often. We also have a bit of a darker but lighter blue still, navy blue. And we have this kind of a desertish tan, which also looks really good. We also did this the same for the hoodies as well. And so if you did enjoy the merch, or if you hadn't gotten any, but unfortunately missed the limited edition run, we still have merch that you can get to support the Lee Spring Army and help this channel to keep on running. Of course, we kind of have a by and large rule that we do not allow any Ukrainian imagery on this, because at that point I don't really feel like that's morally right. It's all supporting the channel, and so all of the imagery on it is channel based. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next question. I just want to let you all know that that is on the store now. You can find the link to that store in the description below. I believe is the first or the second link. It should say go to the merch store, support our channel, and it'll have the link. You can just click on it and it'll take you straight to the store. There's also a link to the Discord channel where you can go down there and you can join the Lee Spring Army community. We have a Discord server where y'all can all enjoy talking to each other, discussing things, and sometimes wringing each other's necks out, because that happens in the Discord server sometimes. And we also have a link to this map that you see on stream. You can click on all of it, and it'll take you exactly to where you need to go. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $30 super chat from Gas, who says, "Greetings from Finland, Turku."
And thank you so much for the support. And it is cool to hear that we have viewers from all around the world, and we hardly hear from viewers in Finland or Sweden. In fact, a large amount of the Norse countries are quiet. Actually, though, well, not Norse, I'm sorry, Scandinavian. I used the incorrect term right there. But we have had Norwegian viewers on stream often. We've had, I believe, one Swedish person on stream before. I actually found out we do have some French viewers, which I thought were non-existent until I looked through my comments section and saw we had at least two. But we have hardly heard of anyone from Finland, so welcome to the stream. I'm glad to have you here, glad to have you as a member of the Lee Spring Army, and hopefully Sweden and Finland will be on the fast track to join NATO. Of course, we call their joint situation Swedeland on here, considering they're both being brought into NATO as a lump group. But it is really cool to hear, and hopefully, in asking this question, I don't have you dox yourself, but, oh, wait a minute. Matthew, oh my god, I just realized what Turku was about. They're from Turku in Finland. Turku, the city.
Is that a place?
Yes, it is. I
wouldn't know.
I told Matthew it's a Finnish word before the stream, and I forgot I had heard it before when I was looking at Finnish geography. So let's go over there. real quick on Google Maps. Hopefully my Google Maps will work. Oh, I don't think it's going to work. We'll just type in Turku and take a look at it. Because we always love to look at where some of our Lee Spring Army members are from. And I've heard a lot of good things about Finland. So let's take a look at some of the pictures of Turku. Oh, come on. My internet's working kind of wonky tonight. Let's see here. I want to find anything about this. We got it on Wikipedia. I hate to do this. Usually we pull it up on Google Maps and take a little look at Street View, but let's all take a look at Turku for a minute. Well, these pictures are really nice. It looks like a nice little green city. Let's see here. Let's scroll on down. There's the Turku Cathedral. Very nice looking cathedral, actually. I don't know what kind of architectural style it's in, but that honestly looks like the top of the Singer Tower. Right here. We won't pull that up for time reasons, but still, if y'all want to pull that up, I highly suggest it. There's the area of the Turku Cathedral. It looks like they actually had, maybe, if I had to make an assumption, it's always a fire that leads to redesigns on a building. So there was most likely a fire, and they redesigned that dome we saw in the painting up here to the one down here. It looks like the same, yeah, it's the same tower, I believe. Well, it may not be. I'm not entirely sure. But still, pretty interesting to see. But let's see if we can get some real pictures of the town. Oh my gosh, wow, Matthew. They built some massive cruise ships here. The Oasis of the Seas was built in Turku.
Well, that is really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Medieval market in Turku. Pretty neat, pretty neat. There's the Turku Cathedral. Pretty cool. Really nice town. That is actually a very nice town. I'm really impressed with this. So thank you so much for the support and letting us take a little bit of a look at your hometown of Turku. And thank you so much for being a Lee Spring member, a Lee Spring Army member from Finland, because that is, once again, really cool. And considering the situation y'all are having with the Russians, at least about a month or two ago, I hope that y'all can join NATO and make sure to have the defense and the umbrella of the entirety of the Western world on y'all's, supporting y'all behind y'all's backs. And so with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and thank you once again.
And the last question of this segment goes to Dio Split, who puts in a $22 donation and says, Slava Ukraine and go LSA.
And Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much for the support to the entirety of the Lee Spring Army. We were able to raise some $7,500 on last Sunday's fundraiser, and that's brought up our total pretty high. I have not done the exact math at the moment. Of course, we've just to kind of like touch on this again, Matthew and me have had an extremely hectic past 2 days due to some things that have been going on with our family. But for the privacy of my parents, I don't really want to say what's happened to them, but it was of course pretty tough to deal with it. It pretty much ate up all of our time from yesterday and today in a way, and I've also been trying to work on college and this in the background as well, and so we've been pretty swamped. So sadly I haven't been able to add up the math on that, but we are getting really close to rounding the corner of $400,000 raised in support of nonprofits operating in Ukraine. And if that isn't impressive, I don't know what is. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and Slava Ukraini, and Slava, the Lee Spring Army, who's been here for 160 days and continues to be here and continues to support Ukraine and listen to the nightly news. And so with that, we are now moving on out of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat tonight, do not worry, we get to every single one of them before the end of the night, and we also answer as many live chats as we can. You do not have to pay to get a question answered on here. We, of course, this is the only way we support ourselves is through super chats. We don't run ads on anything. Everything is ad-free. So if you would like to help this channel to keep on running, please throw in a super chat. It helps us out a lot. Any support helps. But at the same time, don't feel pressured to do that. And also, if you want to ask a question, you can just throw one in the live chat, and we will most likely get around to it at the end of the stream. And so with that, we're now moving out of the location unknowns and into the Kharkiv and Donbass regions. And boy, have we gotten a lot of news from the Kharkiv area over the past 48 hours. Starting off, we've seen Russian vehicles being destroyed by Ukrainian artillery in the area. And so, here's the video. We see the artillery coming down, and that one appears to have caused a nice little fire. And now the tank is roasting quite nicely. We can now see a Russian crew member. It actually looks like a BMP or a BMD? I can't really tell you for certain. It was a hard look. We see a Russian soldier down there. Well, then maybe they're part of a tree. The artillery is still coming down on the Russian positions. And it looks like another little fire has been started. And we can also see Euro 4320 there on the road. Now they've hit another vehicle. This is the third vehicle we've seen get hit. And we can see Chergovi, Brati, Broga. DBA, BTR, I'm not going to read the rest of it. I butcher Ukrainian. I can read Cyrillic a little bit, but I don't know it all too well. But still, we can see that this says BTR, so apparently one of the vehicles destroyed was a BTR. So with that, great to see. It's wonderful to know that Ukrainian artillery is still knocking out Russian forces in the Kharkiv area. And not only that, but we've seen action picking up once again in the Kharkiv area over the past 48 hours. It appears that both sides are starting to conduct some decently sized amounts of activity compared to what we've seen prior. But on yesterday, on day 159, we saw a little Tunguska getting blown away. Tunguskas are one of Russia's most advanced self-propelled anti-air systems in their inventory, and in this video, we're about to see one of them end up ceasing to be a Tunguska. We can see it right there, sitting in the tree line. And these have actually been quite rare to see during the war. We've seen more Pantsirs than we've seen Tunguskas. But as we can see right there, that Tunguska just got wiped out in a single shot, and now it's having a strobe light. If you are epileptic, make sure not to watch this video because there's a lot of strobing lights in it. And we can now see the Tunguska sitting there with a nice little fire roasting on the side of it. We can now see it. I believe this is a replay. It looks like the exact same footage we just saw previously, but let's just make sure. And it is. So it looks like the video is going in a loop. But still, a Tunguska was destroyed, and something we have never looked into during the entirety of this war is how much does a Tunguska cost? 16 million! Good lord, this thing's more expensive than a Pantsir. And so we just watched the equivalent. Oh, let me do the math. 6, 9, 12, 15. About 5 T-72B3s worth in cost go up in a single artillery explosion. And Tunguskas, as far as we know, is one of the most advanced, as I said, surface-propelled, self-propelled anti-air systems in the Russian inventory. Also, they kind of just look cool. But this one is definitely not going to be looking cool anymore. It's going to be looking a little bit roasted, maybe a little bit charred. Usually the Ukrainians are pretty bad cooks of Russian vehicles. They usually cook them beyond well done. They cook them into the burnt region. But if that gets the job done, that gets the job done. So with that, it's great to see a $16 million Tunguska go up in flames from a single shot, a very well-placed shot at that. And with that, we are moving on to the next one, which we've actually seen somewhere in the area of Lipsy, where we saw Ukrainian artillery slamming into some Russian units, and of course, knocking them out. This was taken by the Azov in the Kharkiv area, and we can see what appears to be a Russian unit set up in this field. Looks to be all Euro 4320s, from what we can tell. Wait a minute, no, correction. These are combine harvesters, and we see a farm truck moving in between them. We can also see a Russian military vehicle on the edge of that field, near the combines. We now see the artillery firing away at these Russian units in the tree line. Technica. So there's some kind of something back there, but it looks like the Azov was firing at them, and it looked like they may have been able to get a couple of hits, although we couldn't really tell. Still great to see that the Azov is in operation up there and is making sure to let their presence be known to the Russians and let them know there's not going to be an easy break during the entirety of this war. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit, and last bit of news we've gotten from the Kharkiv area, where we can see some Ukrainians coming under attack from artillery. From what we can tell, this was taken on GoPro. The Ukrainian forces are moving down this dirt path on the side of the road. And we now see them firing into the distance at what may be Russian forces. They're now laying down the fire, and we see that the perspective has changed. The soldier has moved, and the video was cut for a second. Looks like something just exploded to the side of him, and it looks like some shrapnel kicked up and hit him, if we look at this again. It sounds like he's been hit. Looks like the perspective has changed. You see the soldier over here fire an RPG just a second ago. You see the machine gunner continuing to fire, and I'm trying to find out. I'm quietly sitting here for a bit because I'm trying to figure out if this footage was after he got hit by the shrapnel bit or not. I can't really tell you for certain. It did sound like he was breathing heavily. That may be because he ran into that position and then dove into it, but I'm not entirely sure. We now see the machine gunner getting up and moving through the brush. And now we can see the pile again. These may be two entirely different machine gunners that were looking at their footage. We now see another explosion occur nearby. More shrapnel flew to him. You hear him talking to someone in the distance. I believe this is the soldier that's been hit. Ooh. Yikes. Well, we saw a lot of, I have to figure out how to say this to get around YouTube censors, but we saw a lot of Kool-Aid on everything. I don't know if he's okay or not. I don't know what happened to him after this video, but it seems like he got hit pretty bad, but he took it like a champ. Someone said in the live chat, I saw them giving a translation, they said he actually said he's fine, and we can see that he certainly was not fine, but still he was going to continue on with his duties, much like every Ukrainian soldier with their stiff upper lip, and then try and get a little bit of help afterwards. Hopefully it wasn't too late. Hopefully they were able to fix it up and get him off somewhere where he could be treated well, but the amount of stuff that was on everything, it looks like he may have been in a pretty bad situation there. But once again, Ukrainian soldiers never yield, they never give up. We've never really seen them do that unless if it is literally the final option they have. And I gotta say that this man is definitely a soldier through and through, and one of the bravest there is to get hit like that and then still hold their position and then pull back off of it to go get some help after seeing what we saw in the video. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Kharkiv area. And with all of this in mind, we have seen a pickup of activity here. It appears that the Ukrainians may be pushing some kind of a counterattack here because all the footage we've seen has been Ukrainian artillery targeting them or Ukrainians advancing down a road and then getting in a firefight with the Russians like we saw there in this last bit. So I don't know if the Ukrainians have resumed any kind of offensive activity here, but it does appear to be that way based off of the video evidence. We'll have to see if this is backed up over multiple days. That will let us know if the Ukrainians are conducting a counterattack in this area or not. But based off of the past 48 hours and what we have seen, it does appear to be that way. So with that, we're now going to be moving beyond the Kharkiv area and past Chuiv, which has nothing to report as normal, and past the Balaklia area, where the 93rd Brigade has pretty much started to chill out again. The 93rd Brigade, for those of y'all who do not know, pretty much conducts activity in the Balaklia and Izyum area every single day. They almost destroy multiple Russian vehicles or drones or aircraft day after day without fail. Every once in a while, we do not get news from this area, and so I believe that the 93rd has had a pretty quiet day, and they do deserve it because they have been destroying more vehicles on film over the past week or two than any other unit we've ever seen and been able to confirm. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the line and past the Izyum area and the Cave Monastery and Slovyansk, which we've had nothing to report from in this area today. It seems to have fallen somewhat quiet over the past 48 hours based off of the video evidence. And we're now going to be moving into the Lysychansk area, where we have seen some interesting footage. Starting off, we can see that the Ukrainians disabled an entire armored company from what we could see on film. Let me explain. What we're about to see is a Stugna firing at an entire Russian column. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 vehicles on this single road. Maybe even 8. That looks like 2 vehicles in a group. We now see the missile on its way, and the Russian tanks are still sitting there, unsuspecting of what's about to happen. But we all know what's about to happen, as it happens right there.
Yes!
They hit the tank. We can see the other one that was beside it moving. And all the tanks in the background have completely frozen still. From the very start of this video, none of these tanks, all 6 of them, have not moved. The only 2 vehicles that have anything happening to them is the 2 in the front.
Да, разъебал нормально.
Бумагу відмотай, блядь, від цього.
We can see the Stugna being reloaded by the shake of the camera.
Тому що вони ось 2 розбитих, походу, стоять уже.
А де вони вообще?
Ось вони, нахуй, на дорогі.
Now we can see some of the tanks in the rear moving.
Ось я оцього ось, бля.
But the video sadly ends there. We don't know how many more they were able to hit before they moved on out of view of the Stugna, but they certainly took out 1. And you know that freaked out every single Russian tanker in that entire unit because they didn't even move after the shot hit. Apparently the commander, if the commander was not in the tank that was hit, was completely disoriented, was not giving out orders, and all the tanks just stood by and awaited orders, I'm assuming. So pretty interesting to see, pretty cool to look at, and it's wild to think that even this late into the war, the Russians are doing stupid things that they were doing at the very start, like we saw near the Kyiv area, when they would literally get 30 tanks, put them all into one spot on the road, and then the Ukrainian artillery would come down and knock out about 6 or 7 or 8 of them at a time. Pretty cool to see. Can't wait to see more of it, and it looks like the Russians, taking these kinds of losses and being this stupid in their tactics, may not have an easy time reaching Seversk, which we have heard they are trying to reach, although it doesn't appear that a large or a sizable counterattack, well, an offensive, is going on in that direction right now. Moving on into the next bit of news we've gotten near the Lysychansk area, we have seen it, another video from the people that we've seen a lot of videos from in terms of the Foreign Legion. The Georgian Legion is back at it again on the front lines. We've gotten a video today showing us, excuse me, I almost choked on my spit there, but showing us the Georgian Legion firing a drone and using, well, firing a mortar and using a drone to adjust. Sorry, everyone, I'm stuttering over my words tonight. Don't know why. But with that, here's the video. You can see the mortar fire. And they're looking at the camera to see where that mortar round falls. And that's the end of the video, but still really interesting to see, and it is cool to know that drones have been integrated almost entirely into every single Ukrainian unit. We rarely ever see artillery spotters anymore without drones. Artillery spotters are always using drones, the mortar crews are always using drones, and the infantry are using drones as well. In terms of the information every single unit has going into a single confrontation at this moment, the Ukrainians are far beyond anything else we've seen in any kind of war. There's never been a time in warfare, unless if you're the United States over the past, I guess you could say, well, that's not even true. We've been trying to integrate that kind of technology into our infantry nowadays. So right now we're seeing really what I would consider the first of its kind in history, where drones are being used, smaller drones, to a massive extent where even the infantry on the ground can use them to see stuff for themselves. It's really revolutionary. I believe it's something that will be the direction of modern warfare for sure, because it is definitely proving its worth on the battlefield in terms of the information and the efficiency that it provides to the units on the ground. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, which is actually out of the Lysychansk area and further behind the lines, where we've seen a HIMARS firing off into the distance. This is actually, according to the caption, one of those M270s, which were just provided by several countries, including Germany, Britain, and I believe, if I'm correct, the United States. But anyways, here's the video. You can see the rockets on their way. These may also be missiles. Some of the M40, M41 series of rockets are GPS guided. I believe some of them, from what I was reading, may not be, but I may be wrong with that assumption. And just look at the volume of missiles being fired in this video. Every single one of them may be GPS guided and are heading directly towards their targets to hit Russian logistics, communications, and command posts. With that, that is the end of the video, and I gotta say, it is wonderful, and it's a beautiful thing to see that Ukrainians are using HIMARS and M270s like no other country has in the era of modern warfare, and that we're seeing them level Russian logistics commands and, let's see, communications posts. I was trying to remember the three there. It's the holy trinity of what they've hit with all of these HIMARS attacks. But we still see them conducting them, and hopefully every single one of them is dead on accurate. With that, we're now moving on to the next bit of news, which is closer to the Bakhmut area, where we've seen a Grad firing at the Russians here as well. The Ukrainians have used a large amount of artillery over the past 24 hours, and most specifically over the past few hours, as we can see that this video was uploaded only 8 hours ago. We can see the Grad. Well, actually, that's an Uragan firing right there. A little bit larger than a Grad. So pretty interesting to see there, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians still have the logistics to fire off as much artillery as they need whenever. The Ukrainian logistical chains, as far as we know, have been running pretty smoothly over the course of the war, because we've never really heard of anyone running out of ammunition so far, or any ammunition shortages taking over an area on the front. Of course, we most likely wouldn't hear about that, because that could let the Russians know that there's a weak spot in the front, which they might be able to exploit. But still, as far as we can tell on video, every single part of the front line has rarely ever run into a supply problem, especially with the artillery. With that, we're now going to be moving on out of the Luhansk area of the Donbass, and we're now going to be moving down into the Donetsk area. Of course, in both of these areas, it's largely been a stalemate. The Russians have not made any advances, and the front lines have been holding, at least for now, as far as we can tell. But with that, in the Avdiivka area, we can see that there was apparently a firefight in the area today, and this was taken from a Russian helmet cam, letting us know that the Russians may be apparently trying to push a small offensive into the Avdiivka town area. They haven't done this in a while, and this area of the front line in the Donetsk region is one of the most heavily fortified anywhere in the country. And so it'll be incredibly hard to punch through, and so the Russians are pretty much pursuing a fruitless goal here, as it most likely will not succeed. And so with that, here's the video. We can hear the fires incredibly close, and for one of the few times on film, we can actually hear the bullet. We can actually hear shots being fired back at them. So this is an actual firefight. Also, I'd like to note the primo Russian training here. Notice the wonderful and firm, I guess you could say, positioning of the stock on the shoulders. Observe. Now, Matthew, I would like to ask you this. Do you think he's hitting anything with aim like that?
It can't be. Not possible.
Now, you see, the Russian infantry, they watch a lot of YouTube as well. They also, well, they don't watch a lot of YouTube. They've been banned off of here, as far as I know. But they watch a lot of videos. And I think this soldier watched a video of a Russian Ka-52 tilting upwards into the air and firing off unguided rockets to fly who knows where to hit who knows what. And he thought, hey, I could do the same thing with my AK. The only problem here is that the Ukrainians are right in front of him, from what we can tell in the video. And of course, the typical Russian tactic is to spray and to pray. So we're going to let the video continue. Now see him loading a underslung grenade.
Пошел ты. На тебе,
Now see him launching your grenade. What in the world are they set up here? A freaking repair shop? Look at all this. Just loads of mags? Like, what?
And it's so junky looking, too.
Yeah, in typical Russian fashion, nothing is organized and there's just trash in the middle of it all. Imagine you're in a real rush and you can't look over at this cabinet and you go for the AK mag, but you pick up the pack of crackers and try and stuff it into the bottom of the AK. Imagine that.
Пацаны, закрывайте ушки, работает утеска.
Now, that's interesting. What in the world would he be hitting aiming so low? Well, he may actually be aiming a little bit sideways, but from this angle, well, from here, he's definitely shooting right into the dirt, just right out of view. Well, he didn't. Wait a minute, hang on. AK-74S. Nope, that's not what we're looking for. AK-74 carbine. Okay. Alright, so I was about to flip. I thought for a second he didn't even have a rear sight on this AK based off of how this looks, but apparently on the carbine version of the AK-74, that is just how the sight looks. That really threw me off for a second, and I literally was about to go on a giant rant about how the Russians were so poorly equipped. They didn't even have rear sights on the AKs, but apparently that's a sight. I don't really know how this one works, though, because usually the Russian sight is has pretty much remained unchanged since the Mosin. But anyways, I'm going to let this video continue. Oh, yeah, look at that. Now, these guys...
Oh, my God.
These guys were top of their class in the basic training. These guys literally got AKs, no training, and were told, okay, go fight, and they have no idea what they're doing. They watch some movies, and that's about all the experience they have.
Уйди. Уйди, уйди.
We now see him fire another underslung grenade.
Принял плюс.
Also, you know how the Russians always try and look calm and collected? Tell me if the shaky little antenna there is calm and collected.
Принял плюс.
That shaky antenna, look at that.
Принял плюс. Белка ежику, белка ежику. Продолжается стрелковая в нашу сторону.
We now see them. Now they. Oh my God! There's the garbage heap. They have it here. Even before the firefight, they were literally standing out in front of this little post they've made inside of this garage, and they were making a giant trash heap here too. I mean, like, the Russians don't put any effort into anything, do they? They don't put effort into cleaning up trash, and it's not just keeping it clean just for the hell of it. Putting out trash like this pretty much advertises where you are. If you don't know, historically, back in the 1800s, which is a long time ago, but this still stands to this day. Enemy armies could figure out where the other one was and where they were moving by the amount of garbage and remnants that an army would leave behind. For example, when Wellington's army in the Peninsular Campaign was marching through Spain, the French army was able to find out, and also the English army was able to figure this out about the French army, where each other were, based off of the amount of crap they left behind. You would know where the army was going because there would be a pot left on the side of the road, there may be a blanket, there may be some gear, there may be anything left on the side of the road, and it's just in a long stream as tens of thousands of men are on a march and they're just dropping stuff along the way. And so it pretty much lay out a trail of where that military was going. Of course, in the modern day, wars are not fought in large line battles like they once were, but garbage can still give away your location incredibly easily, especially in the drone age, where a drone can fly over. Look at this giant garbage heap with some military stuff in it, it appears, some camouflaged, I guess you could say textiles or cloth, and they would be able to say, oh yeah, there's the Russians, they're right there, there's the giant trash heap. You would think they'd learn. Anyways, we're going to let the video continue. You now see him firing off rifle grenades in random directions. And we can also see that they wrote a wish list of stuff on the wall that they wanted. For example, a Strela right there. Also, we have some more graffiti over here. And we have... what's this one say? Kuzya. I don't know what that means. If someone could translate that in the live chat, I would love to know what that means. And with that, that's the end of the video. And if this is what the Russians are doing in the Avdiivka area, I don't think they're going to be getting incredibly far. So with that, we have now reached the end of this video, and we're going to move on to the next one from the Donetsk region, somewhere in the Pisky area, where we've seen a Russian tank firing in the area. Without further ado, here's the video. Notice this one is, I guess you could say, kitted out to the max for the Russians. They actually put a camouflage net on this thing, which we have never seen before. This is the first time on film I've seen the Russians use anything like this. You now see it firing. Not really making an attempt at repositioning, are they? They're really just in the same spot. They are literally in the same spot. Welcome everyone to Russian Tank Simulator 2022. As you can see, you just drive up into a single spot, fire off about 50 rounds, completely wear out the barrel in this tank probably in the process, and wait until a Stugna slams into you and finishes you off. It's a pitiful existence, perpetrated by a small moment of knowing that you screwed up once the molten hot Stugna comes blowing through the side or the front or the rear of the tank, pretty much vaporizing everything in it and causing a massive ammo detonation. Of course, the Russians aren't going to show us that part of the story, but they are going to show us the part where they fire off 50 rounds into one direction and don't move whatsoever. Wait a minute. I think we may have just seen them. Nah, I don't think so. No. I was about to say, I thought we just saw them do something intelligent here, but it looks like apparently whatever happened, it went faulty. These smoke grenades here, which as we'll see right here, boom, you hear that little plumping sound. That's a smoke grenade being launched. These things will either explode on the ground or explode in the air. They're filled with white phosphorus, and white phosphorus not only burns a pretty good bit, but it also creates an incredibly thick smoke cloud. And so this thing is supposed to fire and at some point create a field of smoke, but as you can see, as we'll let the video continue, the little paper fragments come flying down out of the air where the smoke grenades were launched, but the smoke grenades never went off, and this is past a long enough amount of time that they should have gone off at some point. We should at least see a little trickle of white smoke somewhere. but there's nothing. I think all of their smoke grenades just failed on film. And we can also see them doing the typical Russian tactic, which is where, after they sit there for about an hour and give away their location of exactly where they are and do not move, they then show the backside of the tank, the weakest part to the Ukrainians, so that way they can get off the good shot to end their miserable existence in this tank. Now they drive off. Not a single smoke grenade had gone off. Now that's pitiful. They can't even supply working smoke grenades. In fact, let's pull up real quick because I want to show you how these things are actually supposed to work. Tank smoke grenades. Tank smoke grenades. Alright. So, this is from a Leclerc. Of course, each one can be a little bit different, but I'm going to show y'all in this video what a Leclerc's smoke grenades would do when launched. You see here, Leclerc is a pretty cool tank. Highly suggest y'all pull it up. You see it driving, it fires the smoke grenades, and it gets this giant smoke screen. Just massive. I mean, like, it shrouds the entire tank for that amount of time. Now, what I want to pull up, though, is a Russian tank doing this. So let's look through here for a second. Let's see if we can find a Russian tank firing off smoke grenades. There's the engine smoke. We're not looking for that. We're looking for... Wow, Panzerfaust. We're looking for a T-72 or something similar. Oh, come on. Okay, let's pull that up. T-72. Smoke grenade. Tank smoke screen. Maybe this video will show it. I want to find it, though. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That is a T-90. So this is something used by the Russian military. Here's smoke grenades being used. And look at what they actually look like when they actually work. Look at how thick that smoke screen is. You can't even see the tank through it. And those grenades went off within seconds of being launched out of the tank, and they did explode midair. We can now see what appears to be a striker, probably in Afghanistan, using a smoke grenade. Let's see if we can see these here. Some kind of amphibious invasion training. I'm not sure by which country. We can now see... it looks like a K2 Panther from the Korean Army. Yeah, that's the K2. We now see the Koreans showing off their smoke screens now they work. And look, I mean, they work. They actually obscure the tanks. We can see that video of the Leclerc. We can see a video of more K2s. K2s are pretty cool tanks, too. The South Koreans have a pretty solid main battle tank. There's a South Korean armored personnel carrier. Forgot the specific name for it. We can see an M1 Abrams, at least a simulation of what the smoke screen would look like. We see another amphibious invasion of them coming ashore. Not sure which country, though. And finally, the last video we see is another South Korean light tank using its smoke grenade dischargers. And you can get the picture here that these things actually are supposed to work. But what do we get with the Russians? Some piddly little pum pum, and then nothing. Absolutely nothing. Very pitiful. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk region. We haven't heard of any actual serious offensives or defensives being conducted. It appears that the front line's been static beyond these two bits of news we've gotten today, which in themselves don't really suggest any Russian offensives or any Ukrainian offensives. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the final segment of news, which will be covering the Southern Front, the Kherson area, and finally, the speech from President Zelensky. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into the last bit of news.
And first up, we have to address the poll that has been up for about 30 minutes, and the question was, do you believe that China is assisting Russia behind the scenes to support their war in Ukraine? 50% of you said that yes, they must be, 39% said maybe, and 12% said no, they aren't. And once more, I have to agree with that 50%. I think that China has to be assisting behind the scenes, and if they aren't already helping, they definitely will probably start helping after they decide to do something with Taiwan, would be my best guess. But what is your take, Enforcer?
I would say I would actually have to side with the 39% and say maybe, because there's a couple of things that the Chinese may not support Russia for. Number one, the Russians and the Chinese kind of have a little bit of an unstable relationship with each other. And while right now it's on good footing, and just not too long ago, about in the year 2000, the Chinese and the Russians were actually having small clashes on the Manchurian border because they generally just don't have good diplomatic relations. Honestly, I would consider the Chinese and the Russians to be into two entirely different spheres. Of course, the head of each. The Russians are still trying to hold on to their sphere of influence over the Stan series of countries in the Central Asian area, and also right now, as we can see, they're trying to extend their influence over the former republics of the Soviet Union here in the West. So for that reason, and considering that the Russians have their own ambitions and they do conflict with the Chinese may not support them. But at the same time, the Chinese may be seeing an opportunity that although the Russians are their rivals for the large part, much like they are to the United States, that they could support them and help this war to drag on longer, damaging the Russians even further and spending up time that the West could use elsewhere, like we could be with Taiwan right now. So the Chinese might be seeing this as a time to play both sides to their disadvantage and hopefully help themselves out a little bit. So with that regard, I could see it as maybe. It could really go either way, in my opinion. So with that, I hope that does address the poll on my end, and we are on to the first question of this segment.
And moving on to the first question of the segment, we have a $100 super chat from Michael Bolton, who says, "Hello, Enforcer team. Great job, and I hope we continue to send our HIMAR gifts to the Russians. Dear Russia, take your trash with you, and you leave all of it." And thank you very much, Michael, for the support. And yes, the filthy orcs do need to take their trash with them.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Michael, and I have to say, the Russians are trying their best. They're trying to get as much trash as they can. The only problem is that they only get the soldiers out. They don't get the actual physical trash out. So they're only dealing with half the problem. But I do agree, they need to clean up that trash. Also, the other thing is that I do agree completely that I hope we continue to send over more HIMARS, or at least more HIMARS missiles, so that way the Ukrainians can keep on trying to turn around this war. If the Ukrainians have to, they may start, because one thing that we do have to consider is that while the Ukrainians do require as much resources as possible, there's only so much we can give them before we send over too much that they can't use some of it. The Ukrainians might have to start phasing out some of their older systems like the peons and filling in those batteries with HIMARS if we send more of them over. Still, with that in mind, it's far better to have a HIMARS instead of a peon, because a HIMARS can cause far more meaningful damage than a peon can. Destroying frontline units is part of the battle, but destroying the supplies and the connections that those frontline units have to their rear is one of the most important things you can do. As Napoleon once said, which I have not quoted in a long time before, an army marches on its stomach. And while an army has moved beyond just men with rifles and some cannons, along with horses, we have moved on into a world where an army still marches on its stomach, and tanks have stomachs of their own. The guns eat up the ammo, the engines eat up the fuel, and so in a way they have stomachs as well. And if you can deprive every single stomach of the Russian military, both physical and mechanical, that is a way to win this war far better than directly fighting the Russian infantry without destroying what's keeping them going. And so with that, thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Michael Bolton. Of course, you've helped us out a lot before, and I thank you so much once again for being a continuing member of this Leaf Spring Army and helping this channel to keep on going. Also, just to keep this in mind for everyone, I know that we are only going to be running streams for now, and we have no short summary videos to speak of. We are looking into a fix to that. I have had an offer to see about fixing that. We are going to see how that goes. And another thing is that we will be continuing on with different kinds of news in about a week's time. Right now was a pretty good time for me to take a break. Finals are happening this very week. Which also kind of pertained to that situation as well, as I was like, I cannot survive both finals and a 10-hour workday every day, considering I'm taking a full credit of a full, I guess a full semester of classes. So that also weighed into the side of ending those short summaries. So after this week is over, and maybe a little bit into next week, we are going to start over new videos. They may not be as constant as every single day. They may be weekly on things that are occurring around the world. Hopefully, y'all will all enjoy them, and it will start off something that everyone will enjoy and be very successful, and a lot of people will like to enjoy and listen to. A lot of y'all as we can tell right now, there's 6,300 of y'all watching. A lot of y'all enjoyed this analysis, and so my logic is if y'all enjoyed this analysis on this war, I'm sure y'all would enjoy it on many other things around the world. Of course, here's another thing I would like to say. Some people say that we don't get things correct with economics. I have seen that sometimes on stream, and in some ways I agree, in some other ways I disagree, because people try and bring politics into the issue of economics, which we're not going into here. But one thing I would like to say is that when we make videos like the government cheese videos, that isn't just me shooting off all of the knowledge I already had off of my head. There's a lot of research that was involved in that government cheese video to get the dates correct, the people correct, you know, like the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. I do a lot of research behind the scenes for a video like that, so the information that we would have on these videos would of course be much more well researched and well put out. Sometimes on stream, because we're doing this live and I don't have a support team behind me just funneling me information when I need it, I have to say things off the cuff, and sometimes they can be correct and sometimes they can also be wrong too. So I just wanted to explain that real quick, but I think y'all will really enjoy those videos when they come out here in the future. So with that, thank you once again, Michael Bolton, for the support. Your support helps us to keep these streams going and also help us to expand in the future. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And yes, thank you very much, Michael, for that. And also, I can't place it, but I know I've heard the name Michael Bolton somewhere, but I'm not really sure where I've heard it from. But if you are that Michael Bolton, please put it in the live chat, because I know I've heard your name somewhere. I think the Enforcer's actually looking it up right now.
Michael Bolton, American singer/songwriter. Is that who you're thinking about?
No, I think I was thinking of maybe a politician or somebody in the government, but
Michael Bolton.
I think that might be a slightly different name.
Politician. Let's pull that up. John Bolton?
Ah, yeah, somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that guy.
But if you're Michael Bolton, the song writer and singer, let us know too, because that would be pretty interesting. So with that, thank you once again for the support, Michael, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Christian Anderson for putting in a $50 super chat, but without a comment. But thank you very much, Christian, for the support. And me and the Enforcer appreciate you very, very much. And moving on to our next one, we have a $20 super chat from Phil Tatham, who says, "For the Everything Fund, gents," and they put the Union Jack in there.
Well, thank you so much for the Everything Fund, and also thank you so much for the support and being a Lee Spring member. Lee Spring Army. I'm cutting out the Army part for some reason tonight. I don't know why. Sorry, everyone. But being a Lee Spring Army member from the United Kingdom, we actually have a lot of British viewers. Pretty much a lot of viewers from, I guess you could say, all the former colonies, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. We have a lot of American viewers, a lot of Canadian viewers, British viewers, Irish viewers. We have a few. And a lot of Australian viewers and New Zealanders. We also have a couple of Indians, and generally, pretty much everywhere that the British have controlled at the point, we have viewers from, which is, of course, pretty interesting to think about. And so thank you so much once again for the support, for the fun to end all funds. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again so much for the support, and so much for being a longtime member of this Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to 3 donors tonight. We have a $20 donation from Edward Curl, as well as Mikhail Fredrickson and Compound David. They all leave a $20 donation each, but without a comment. And all 3 of you, thank you so much for your support. And we appreciate you being subscribed to the channel for a very long time and being around and being a viewer. So Enforcer, I forgot to ask, but do you have anything to add to those 3 as well as Christian Anderson?
Yes, I do. I thank every single one of y'all for y'all's support. Of course, y'all didn't throw in comments, which, man. But still, it kind of, in a way, it is a little bit of a blessing, but a curse. I would love to sit here and, of course, give y'all each equal attention for helping us to keep this thing running, because without y'all, we wouldn't be able to keep it going. And every once in a while, and I would like to just say this for a second, every once in a while, I do see a comment whenever I roam through my comment section of someone saying, "Oh, you spend so much time talking about these people sending super chats." And I will say, yes, I do, but there's a great reason. They're literally the only thing in between us running these streams and us having to stop them. We don't make money on anything on here, ad revenue wise. And so we rely entirely on the viewers to keep us running, because I used to work 60 hours a week on this stuff every single week, and even cutting out the summary videos, I've now cut down my time per week to around 50 something hours, probably around 52. So with that in mind, they're still helping me to do this as a full-time job, and I want to give every single one of y'all credit, including you, Christian Anderson, and the other 3 of y'all for helping us to keep this thing running, because without y'all, it wouldn't be possible. And that's why I always sit here and want to recognize every single one of y'all, because y'all are helping us to keep this thing going, and that is incredibly important to me. Of course, it's the most important thing to me, because without y'all, I wouldn't be here and talking about it. And so thank you once again to all 4 of y'all for y'all support. Y'all helped this channel to keep on running, and while y'all didn't throw in a question, I still want to recognize each and every one of y'all for being members of the Sleeve Spring Army and helping us to keep on going. And with that, we're now going to move on to the final question, and then we'll move on into the last bit of news.
And the final question of this segment goes to Santiago Flores, a longtime channel supporter who puts in a $20 donation and says, a follow-up to my observation about a future armed border between Russia and Ukraine. If Ukraine joins NATO, we will see NATO troops on the border like Germany in the 1980s.
That is true. And I thank you very much for the support, Santiago. And that is a very true point. If Ukraine does join NATO, Ukraine will become the NATO frontier. It'll become the brand new NATO frontier. And so soldiers, most likely American soldiers, will be stationed there. But there is a little bit of a caveat. France is a member of NATO, but there are no foreign forces inside of France, thanks to Charles de Gaulle and his principle that he kind of operated under in the 50s, which was kind of weird because he would join, I guess you could say, international alliances and economic coalitions, but he would never allow anyone to actually, I guess you could say, do anything in France. It's kind of weird because we have tens of thousands of American soldiers buried in France all over the place from the First World War and the Second World War. And yet, for some reason, there is no American soldiers stationed in France. And I guess you could say that in both world wars, they could accredit the victory in the end, and specifically the liberation or the defense of France, both in the Second and First World War, to the United States and the United Kingdom. Yet neither country has any of their forces within France in an actual permanent base. There may, of course, be some, I guess you could say, liaisons or some kind of a rotation of advisory staff through France, but there's no permanent base there. So with that, we're now going to be moving on out of that question. Ukraine could also be the same. That could be something in the peace agreements that Russia says you can join NATO, but you're going to have to make a condition of joining NATO that no foreign military forces can be within your borders. That may be something they say. So with that, thank you once again so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, Santiago, because it is a very interesting one. And so with that, we've now reached the end of this question segment. We're now going to be moving on into our final bit of news in the Southern Front and the Kherson area, and after that, we'll then be moving into Kyiv to listen to the speech from President Zelensky. And so without further ado, we have to travel to the Southern Front, where we've gotten loads of news from a unit that everyone has heard about, the Azov. Starting off on day 159, we can see the Azov destroying a BMP-3 with a drone. You hear some music there. And let me back this up here so we can try and see that bomblet. The bomblet goes falling and smacks right onto the front of the turret. And we can see what may be a small shrapnel hole right there. It looks like there's only one. We now see them hitting it with more bomblets. We now see them lining up another bomblet to drop. There goes the next one. And, oh, it's so close. It's so close to getting on the inside of the BMP. Okay, now they skip forward a little bit. It looks... it looks like the Ukrainians did the typical, okay, so I did a little bit of grinding off screen kind of thing, and they finally hit the BMP, and now we can see the thing having large ammo detonations, and it looks like it's been blown to pieces, literally, in the middle of this burned wheat field. The other one, on the other side of the tree line, is pretty much A-okay. Oh, look, that was rare. Look, it's a smoke ring, Matthew, right there.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've never seen that before. That's the end of the video, and we can see that apparently Russian tanks can apparently blow smoke rings, which lets us know that they have a lot of experience with smoking. Currently, thousands of Russian tanks have fallen victim to the, I guess you could say, the devil's. It's not lettuce. I gotta come up with a cool joke there to say about that later on, but I'll let the live chat fill in the blanks. What is it? The devil's what? Fill in the blank and let us know. So with that, it's great to see another Russian BMP being blown up. That one was abandoned, but it's still good to see that they'll never be able to recover it and use it again. With that, we're now going to move on to the Day 159 news from the Azov Battalion, and we've seen them destroying even more BMPs today. Here's the video of them taking out a BMP with a javelin. And the javelin's on its way. And we see out there in the distance an explosion, and we can hear a Ukrainian soldier screaming, "Yes!" Which means they hit it. Pretty good, interesting thing to see, and it's great to see that they knocked out a BMP with a javelin. It's starting to seem like they're using javelins more and more, which is very, very cool and really interesting to me, and I think it may be suggesting that Ukrainians are starting to move a lot more in an offensive way instead of a defensive way. The Stugna is more is made more for defense than offense, and the javelin, due to its much more portable nature, is more of an offensive anti-tank weapon, and we're starting to see more of these being used in video evidence. With that, we're now going to move on to the final bit of news we've gotten from the Azov today, where we see the Azov capturing Russian trenches. Now, it says spoiler, and I like to say spoiler alert, the Ukrainians will win the war, but here's the video of them taking a Russian position. More trash as usual, trash everywhere. We can now see him picking up his AK. We can now see this Ukrainian soldier doing something somewhat typical, which is called putting Russians to sleep. You see here that he looks down in there and he starts dispensing free naps. I would say that he's not really aiming this thing on his shoulder, but I don't really think he could in this kind of situation unless if you're literally standing on your head. After dispensing the free naps, he then gets up and backs out a little ways, making sure to give the Russians room to cover up with some blankets.
Ще одні кинуті підарами позиції. Сьобувались нахуй, ніхуя не позабирали. Свіжий хлібушек.
More trash. You hear a little explosion in the distance.
Вистріли до РПГ. Сухпайки. А це на ПТУР. 113, по-моєму. Теж кинуті. Їбашили по нам з ПТУРа з цих позицій, нахуй. А тепер уже не поїбашуть, нахуй. Тому що сібались так швидко, нахуй, тільки п'ятки сверкали. Азов працює.
That's the end of the video, and it's really interesting to see how Ukrainians go through and dispense with the sleeping agent. Sometimes they just walk up to the trench, just stick the syringe down in there, and they just make sure to send out the sleeping medicine. Pretty neat to see, pretty interesting, and it's cool to see that the Azov has taken another Russian position. We don't know if this is suggestive of the Ukrainians making counterattacks in the southern front area, but considering that they did take a Russian position, they apparently are making ground in some way, although we don't know exactly where on the southern front. With that, we're now going to move on to our last bit of news for the southern area, where we can see Russians being silenced. I'll just let y'all see this video, because it pretty much explains itself. That's the sound of Russian soldiers taking naps. And that's the sound of Russian commanders' heads exploding after they figure out that another battalion has been wiped out.
Дальше летит, 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 летит.
И дальше, смотри, один квадрат накрыли и левее второй. Сейчас их выхода.
So, with that in mind, pretty cool to see that apparently the Russians are still not having a fun time in the southern front, and it looks like Ukrainian artillery may have given it to them. We don't really know if the Russians were over there. We can't see them on film, but considering that the artillery is landing right in front of an infantry unit, it could be that this infantry unit spotted the Russians in the distance, called in the artillery, and then a drone spotter went out there and made sure the fire was accurate, and that was falling right on the Russians. We can't really confirm that, though. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the southern front from all of that news and onto the Kherson front, where we have two bits of news to speak of. Starting off, we have seen another HIMARS in action overnight. Here's a video of it firing at sunrise. Whenever Russians see HIMARS, someone usually says, it's a shooting star, make a wish, bled. And then one of them wishes, I hope I don't get blown up by HIMARS. And then they say, hey, the shooting star is kind of getting a little close. And, you know, then after that, you know, the story pretty much fills in the rest of the blanks there. But still, great to see HIMARS in operation in the Kherson area. And the last bit of news we've seen is that HIMARS rockets landed in the Chernobyivka area in the early hours of the morning, it appeared. And so here's the video. And these may be, although I feel like the time of day is a little bit too far apart for it to be the same rockets, but they may be. Here's the video of HIMARS rockets landing in the Chernobyivka area. We don't know what specifically these HIMARS missiles are hitting. It could be an ammunition depot, it could be a command post, could be a communication center. We're not entirely sure at the moment, but we do know that the HIMARS missiles were landing somewhere in the middle of Chernobyivka in the middle of the day today. So let's real quick Google Maps. Let's see if it'll work for me this time. Second time's always the charm. No? Very well then. We'll take the answer as no. So with that, that's the last bit of news we've gotten from the Kherson area. And as far as we've seen today, there hasn't been any substantial ground made in counterattacks over the past 48 hours. We haven't been getting a lot of news from this area. That, once again, as I said in the beginning of the stream, led me to believe that this whole entire thing may have been a ruse, considering that the Ukrainians publicized this counterattack for so long and the build up to it. And honestly, we've never seen the official start of it yet. We haven't seen enough action on the front lines itself or the reports of it to let us know that this counterattack was serious. And for that reason, I'm kind of leaning on the side that either it's not succeeding, or this whole entire thing was a ruse or a ploy for Russians to divert their forces from elsewhere on the front line for those areas to then be weakened for the Ukrainians to conduct counterattacks in those exact same areas. We are seeing activity pick up in the Kharkiv area, which does suggest that that may have been the case. But once again, we're not entirely sure. The one thing that's leading me to not say that with a definite certainty is that the Ukrainians destroyed every single bridge crossing in this area, which makes me assume that this may have been a serious idea from the Ukrainians, but at the same time, if they're using HIMARS missiles and just a small amount of them to destroy all of these bridge crossings, doing that to make it look like there's a serious counterattack occurring in this area is a pretty cheap exchange to then conduct successful counterattacks elsewhere. I'm not entirely sure if that is the case. We will be watching the entirety of the front lines to see if this was a ruse or not, but so far we've heard so little news of no advances. Well, actually, we've heard nothing but news of no advances whatsoever in this area. I'm assuming either the counterattack is failing or it never even began to start with, and this whole entire thing was a ruse. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the southern front area and up north to the city of Kyiv. But look, there is no speech from President Zelensky, so we now do the typical thing that everyone does, which is pull up the President of Ukraine's website. We then click on the website, which pulls up the website. We then click on videos, which brings us to the video collection. And then we click on this video where you can see President Zelensky back in his nice office, not in some like hallway or something, and we can see him here giving the speech. And so here's the speech from President Zelensky, and also I'd like to address something that I saw someone say something about in the comments section. Someone said, The enforcer, you shouldn't put the subtitles over President Zelensky's face because that's just rude. And the thing is that I would agree, but the thing is that YouTube doesn't really allow you to put this wherever you want. You either put it in a certain area and it'll pretty much pull it up to where it wants it to be, like that. And so it just kind of ends up in the middle of the screen. But anyways, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky to round out the day 160 news.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні до Босфору прийшло перше судно з українським зерном, здолавши шлях спеціальним коридором у Чорному морі, який був погоджений для розблокування наших портів. Наша мета зараз, щоб була регулярність, щоб коли один корабель виходить з порту, мають бути вже й інші судна, і ті, які завантажуються, і ті, які на підході до порту. Безперервність, регулярність – це потрібний принцип, потрібний усім споживачам нашої агропродукції. Вже багато сказано про те, чому важливо відновити український аграрний експорт. Додам зараз тільки одну деталь. Експорт цього року потрібен, щоб у наших фермерів та агрокомпаній був достатній ресурс для посівної наступного року. Це питання продовольчої безпеки вже і для нашої країни. Зараз забезпечується наступний рік. Росія провокувала продовольчу кризу для того, щоб використовувати постачання пшениці, кукурудзи, олії як зброю. Так само, як вона вже робить з газом і нафтою. Росія створює дефіцит, грає на підвищення цін, а коли це провокує соціальні негаразди, вимагає політичних поступок. Це не повинно спрацювати з продовольством. Звичайно, ми розуміємо, з ким маємо справу. І в Росії розуміють, що втрачають одну з можливостей тероризувати світ. Але коли світ об'єднаний, коли партнери виконують взяті зобов'язання, можна досягати необхідного результату. Подивимось, як працюватиме зернова ініціатива найближчими днями. І я хочу, щоб це усвідомили всі в Україні. Попри ту дезінформаційну кампанію щодо зернової ініціативи, яку розповсюджують вороги нашої держави, кожна гривня, яку заробляють наші аграрії, і всі відновлені міжнародні зв'язки України стануть внеском у посилення нашої держави. Говорив сьогодні з генеральним секретарем НАТО Єнсом Столтенбергом. Звичайно, ключова тема – це оборонна підтримка нашої боротьби за свободу. Це взаємодія, яку ми маємо посилювати постійно заради наших спільних інтересів. Був в Києві сьогодні голова ОБСЄ і міністр закордонних справ Польщі Збігнев Рау. Подякував йому за підтримку. В переговорах із паном Столтенбергом і з паном Рау приділив особливу увагу питанню щодо наших військовополонених, які утримуються Росією. Зокрема, це стосується і російського теракту в Оленівці, який має стати вирішальним аргументом для усіх цивілізованих країн світу, щоб офіційно визнати Росію державою-терористом. Що ще потрібно для цього? Хіба це недостатньо жорстокий очевидний теракт, щоб у ключових столицях світу були ухвалені відповідні рішення щодо визнання Росії державою-терористом? Звичайно, принципову відповідь на усі свої злочини окупанти отримують і на полі бою. В цьому контексті хочу сьогодні подякувати президенту Сполучених Штатів Байдену і усьому американському народу за новий пакет оборонної підтримки для України. Слово «Хаймерс» стало для нашої країни майже синонімом слова «справедливість». І українські оборонці зроблять все для того, щоб окупанти щотижнево відчували усе більш болісні втрати завдяки цим дуже ефективним системам. Так, дійсно, ми ще не можемо повністю зламати перевагу російської армії в артилерії і в живій силі, і це дуже відчувається в боях, особливо на Донбасі, Піски, Авдіївка і інші напрямки. Там просто пекло. Це навіть не описати словами. І кожен українець повинен бути завжди вдячний нашим воїнам, які захищають українські позиції там, попри відчутну вогневу перевагу терористів. Але щодня наші дипломати і усі інші представники нашої держави роблять усе можливе і усе неможливе, щоб отримати для України ту зброю, яка зрештою допоможе зупинити цю орду. І щоб переконати усіх, хто ще, буває, сумнівається щодо постачання. Сьогодні я дякую також і цим людям, кожному і кожній, хто забезпечує постачання зброї, хто просуває необхідні рішення в державах-партнерах, хто буквально живе у цих переговорах щодо зброї. Маємо і чергові рішення щодо посилення санкцій проти Росії за війну. Сполучені Штати і Канада розширили перелік фізичних і юридичних осіб, проти яких застосовані обмеження. Це правильний шлях, і потрібно, щоб Євросоюз якнайшвидше заповнив санкційну паузу, ухваливши новий пакет санкцій проти держави-терориста. Будемо працювати над цим найближчими тижнями. Ввечері підписав укази про нагородження наших захисників. Державними нагородами відзначені 167 воїнів Збройних сил України, з них 32 посмертно. Іншим указом нагородив 16 розвідників, один з них посмертно. Також 122 співробітники Служби безпеки України, двоє посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Вічна слава усім, хто воює за незалежність. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that rounds out our Day 160 stream. I thank you all so much for watching. Of course, this is not the end of the stream. I just said that, but it's actually the end of the news segment. We're now going to move into the question segment and answer every single question that has been sent in attached with a super chat. I recognize everyone who helps the stream to keep on running, and also answer as many live chats as we possibly can. So, without further ado, to make sure we have as much time as possible to answer the questions, I'm going to let Matthew take over and bring us right into it. So, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so first up, we have to address our final poll of the night. And the question was, does the United States have an obligation to defend Taiwan in the event of an invasion? 61% said yes, the United States has a legal obligation to do so. 25% said not really, maybe. And 13% said no, we do not have to assist. So, Enforcer, what are your thoughts on that?
I would believe that the United States does have a legal obligation to protect Taiwan, especially if we recognize them as a legitimate sovereign country. On top of that, we have a lot economically that we rely on for the Taiwanese, specifically the TSMC company, which surprisingly enough, its manufactories within Taiwan consume more electricity than Taipei per day, and Taipei is the capital of Taiwan. So that kind of gives you an idea of how big TSMC is and how important they are to the world. They produce more they produce more computer chips than anyone around the world. Something like 80% of total world production comes from TSMC, and for that reason alone, we have an economic duty, and not only that, but a I guess you could say foreign diplomacy duty to make sure that Taiwan is defended from the Chinese. Also, strategically, if TSMC was somehow captured intact by the Chinese and Taiwan became part of the People's Republic of China, that could spell disaster for the rest of the world, as they could hold those computer chips hostage. So with that, I hope that does answer the question in my regard, because I would have to agree with the majority of y'all that we pretty much have a legal obligation to protect Taiwan. And so with that, I hope that does address the question, and we are on to the next one.
And first up from the Super Chats, we have a $20 donation from Kevin Hansen, who says, "'Cause I can."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and if you can, you can. And so thank you very much for the support, because you can. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping us to keep this stream going.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from W, who says, "It's nice to see how inept and incompetent the orcs are in their videos. We should never underestimate just how stupid they really are."
And I have to agree, you can never underestimate how dumb the average enlisted Russian is, and how dumb the average Russian commander is either. They've never really given themselves a case to look competent or good in this entire war, and even to this day, nothing has changed about 6 months into this war. And so I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for saying that, because I would have to say that the orcs have nothing going for them at all in terms of training, in terms of professionalism, in terms of cleanliness. They have nothing at all going in their direction. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, let me recognize a $20 super chat from channel legend BC Skyman, as well as a $10 donation from Scott Mensing, as well as Junebug72, who says hi.
And hey, Junebug72, and also surprisingly enough, this was really cool to me. I actually was able to talk to Junebug72 and Junebug off stream in the Discord server. It was really cool. It's the first time I talked to him, and it was really fun to talk to both of y'all. And so thank you so much once again, Junebug72 and Junebug, for helping us to keep these streams running. And it was an absolute pleasure to talk to both of y'all. Of course, I talked to Junebug for like a minute, but it was really fun to talk to you, Junebug72. And it was really interesting to actually get to know the people who watch this stream and enjoy it so much and help us to keep it running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you to all of y'all for your support as well. It helps us to keep this thing going. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Mofal, who says, do you think that Ukraine will risk the potential manpower loss for a counterattack? The Ukraine army must loosen their frontline defenses to attack. Can they afford to risk this?
Can you reread that again real quick?
Yes, they said, do you think that Ukraine will risk the potential manpower loss for a counterattack? The Ukraine army must loosen their frontline defenses to attack. Can they afford to risk this?
Yes, they can. Not to get into their exact figures from what we were able to estimate, but the Ukrainians do eventually have to retake the land, and accompanied with high-tech artillery systems from the west, it is very possible for them to take ground without really having to put their infantry into direct risk. If the infantry ever get fired at, they can just call behind the lines for an artillery strike onto that specific area, have that area obliterated, and then just take that same position that the Russians were holding, and then, you know, wash, rinse, and repeat. So it's possible for them to do something like that. Of course, it would have to be done carefully, and it would have to be done with the principle of overwhelming firepower instead of a human wave kind of thing. But it is possible, and the Ukrainians do have to retake their land, and we've seen them do it in some places before, and so it's not entirely out of the question. And yes, counterattacks and offensives in general incur a lot more casualties than an offensive, but at the same time, it's something that the Ukrainians have to do to liberate everyone captured behind the lines, and of course try and end this war. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, and thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Bill G, who says the extensive debris of Russian occupation, broken or low morale, and complete collapse for discipline, ?
Yes, if that's a question if all of those things are happening, that is entirely true. As far as we've been able to tell, Russian contract soldiers, and these may be conscripts at this point, although it hasn't been officially said, they appear to be poorly trained. They have almost no experience using any of their gear or their weapons based off of how they actually operate. We can also see that they have low morale, they surrender quite often, or they just retreat out of the area and abandon their vehicles incredibly quickly. So in all of those regards, also with the supply shortages and such things like that, I would have to say, yes, I do believe that that is definitely happening, and isn't just an assumption thrown out there into the wind. Based off the video evidence, the picture evidence, and also the news we've been getting, that largely appears to be the exact case that is happening. So, as an answer to the question, yes. And thank you once again so much for the support, and we're moving on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from John Underwood, who says, Borsuk say this is a Russian war crime.
Borsuk. How do you spell that?
Borsook.
Borsuk.
A doctor?
Apparently with 5 reviews. But I don't, Borsuk, I don't know if that's you. I don't know if this is what you're specifically talking about. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I would have to agree with whoever's saying that. It is definitely a war crime what the Russians have been doing through the entirety of this war, and hopefully the Ukrainians can find the ones who perpetrated these crimes and hold them accountable, from the common enlisted soldier all the way up to the most senior officers in the actual area. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for helping us to keep this stream running, because without y'all, it wouldn't be possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from William Mitchell, who says, Enforcer, I finally figured out why it took so long for the Panzer Haubitz to get to Ukraine. They had to stop for second breakfast, 11sies, luncheon, and tea before killing orcs.
That's probably true. I don't know. I mean, it's a pretty good joke. And could you reread it to me real quick, Matthew? Because for some reason it's starting to slip right out of my head.
He said, Enforcer, I finally figured out why it took so long for the Panzerhaubitze to get to Ukraine. They had to stop for a second breakfast, 11sies, luncheon, and tea before killing the orcs.
Okay, now that it's back in my head, maybe. The other thing that could have happened is that the German government, instead of the Panzerhaubitzes, went out and did all that stuff before they said, okay, we'll send them. But with that, thank you so much for the support. Pretty good joke, but I'm just happy to see that they're there. Of course, the Panzerhaubitze is about the size of an apartment in terms of internal square footage, and so not only did the Ukrainians fight from the Panzerhaubitze, they live in it. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and also a pretty good joke. I like that. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Aquatico50, who says, what's going on in Syria? Assad, Russia, Turkey, Kurds, USA, Iran, and Israel all appear to be active in the area. Any idea what's happening? Also, what is Turkey's special military operation?
These are all incredibly good questions, and I might be able to answer them with the little bit of general knowledge that I know off of the Syrian civil war. So give me just a minute, because we're going to pull up Wikipedia's map, because I don't have a map on that. So let's go to their current map, and here we go. So, to divide this up into what's what, this big red area is what the Bashar al-Assad regime currently controls. The green is the Turks. I believe the yellow is the Syrian Democratic Forces. Yes, those are. We can also see the Syrian Arab Republic makes up the orange area. So I would largely say that although it's divided up into two different colors, both of these are pretty much the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are the people we are supporting right now in this war. And so pretty much, if we divide this down into everything, Revolutionary Commando Army, I guess they're new. We can see that ISIS has, of course, been obliterated. Everyone kind of had a hand in obliterating ISIS. But we can see that the three large contenders now are the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Turks, and the Bashar al-Assad regime, which controlled the country before the war. We can see that they've largely recaptured a decent amount of the country. It looks like 2/3 of it from, just trying to guesstimate. But the Syrian Democratic Forces are the second largest holding in the country, and the Turks are the third. The Turks, it's really hard to say why they really invaded. I think they just invaded just to try and get their finger into the pie in a way. I would have to actually look into it a little bit more because I'm sure that there's an actual justification as to why. But then again, the Turks, they're kind of a little bit of a tough case to answer because they still kind of have this thing where they want to kill Armenians. If y'all know anything about the Armenian genocide, they kind of did that before, and they kind of still have this hatred against the Kurds, which are kind of their new Armenians these days. And there's a decent amount of Kurds in the north of Syria, a little bit in Turkey, and also in northern Iraq. So it may be perpetrated for that reason alone. But also the weird thing is that they're going against the United States' and pretty much the entire Western world's interests, as pretty much everyone's laid their eggs in one basket, which is the SDF basket. And then the Turks came in and went to war with both Bashar and also the SDF. So it's kind of a weird story. I can't really explain it all to you right now. This is a pretty complex little thing that's been going on in Syria since 2011, so this has been going on for 11 straight years. So I'd have to look into this and read up on it a little bit to give you the exact story. But right now, there's three large contenders. The Turks are in there going against Western interests and really everyone's interests because they're both fighting the Russian-backed Bashar al-Assad regime, and they're also fighting the SDF as well. And so with that, I hope that kind of answers the question, at least in a little bit of a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one. Also, another thing I'd like to say is that with Syria, because I know that this is going to be brought up, is that the Sykes-Picot agreement kind of divided up the mandates and cut up the borders in a way where every country in the Middle East would be ethnically split to a point where there will always be some kind of unrest going on. And the thing is that is, I feel like that's not really considering everything in an equal picture, because if you look at the Ottoman Empire, and I just got to say this because this always irks me. If you look at the Ottoman Empire and the borders they controlled in 1914, before World War I, you'll notice that in this map right here, which all of them are fairly accurate. Oh, come on, Google. Oh, man. Let's just go here. All right, so here's a picture of pretty much Ottoman-controlled territory in 1914, you'll notice that the entire Kurdish population lived within the borders of the Ottoman Empire. And so I don't really know why anyone tries to make it sound like this kind of a ethnic problem has existed just because of Western influence in the 20th century, because it existed during Ottoman times well up until the 20th century and hundreds of years before that. And also, the same case can be made within Europe when it's not even pertaining to the Middle East. For example, look at the hellhole that the Balkans became because of Yugoslavia and also Austria-Hungary, which is kind of the same thing as the Ottoman Empire, but within Europe itself. It's kind of a thing that annoys me a little bit, with people saying that this was deliberately done on purpose and these borders were drawn up this way in a deliberate way to cause different ethnic groups to fight each other. Because you could say that the exact same thing has happened in Europe over hundreds of years, because if you can tell me a single border within Europe that's been drawn up to account for ethnic groups perfectly, I will still be sitting here and I'll be waiting, because there's really not a single one in Europe, unless if it's a country like, gee, I don't know, Denmark or the Scandinavian countries that have their borders cut up fairly decently. So with that, it kind of addresses an aside there that kind of irks me a little bit with modern history and how people try and write this stuff up here. Because if the Europeans cannot actually draw up the borders amongst their own countries well enough to account for ethnic groups, why in the world would it be expected that borders drawn up elsewhere would be perfectly made? So with that, I hope that kind of addresses that for a second, and also answers what's going on in Syria. And with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, check the distance between CCP and FRC to see if the FRP could use HIMARS. Maybe we should think of looking to provide FRC with them just to piss off the CCP. What say you?
Very good point. If we measure the distance from Taichung City to I guess you could say, shores of the Fujian province to Ganzhou, which y'all may remember was actually a country at the time, the Ganzhou clique. But anyways, they could fire pretty decently into the country. In fact, if we look at the radius that one could fire at just from Taichung City, you could reach Shantou, you reach Zhangzhou, Jimin, Guangzhou, Fuzhou. I'm mispronouncing everything. Very sorry about that. But Nanping, let's see here. Pretty far into the country, pretty much a lot of major Chinese cities on the coastline. So if we did want to piss off the CCP, we could give the Taiwanese HIMARS, and they could actually reach fairly deep into the country without even having to leave the safety of Taiwan's shores. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. It's feasible. No one can ever tell us where we can send military supplies and to whom. So we could definitely do that. And that would also piss off the Chinese a fairly good bit if that was our goal. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat once more from William Allen, who says, I'm a Kurd fan. The Brits and French left them out of consideration when splitting up the Middle East after World War I.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, William Allen. But once again, I don't really think that was necessarily something that the British were unaware of, because they did promise a lot of things, but it's kind of a weird thing, and I would have to go and do a lot of research on it to back up my side, and kind of like the case I give, but we kind of did the same thing to Germany, because if you ever think about it, this little area of France here with Strasbourg in it is really, historically, it's almost always been German, the Alsace-Lorraine area, but yet it's a part of France now. Most of Poland historically was always German, but now it's Polish. And there was a large amount of ethnic Germans that lived there when those borders were drawn up, and it didn't account for those Germans whatsoever. In fact, the argument like that can be made for almost every single country. The French at one time took over Brittany, which were filled with Britons, and they were never considered culturally. And in fact, a lot of stuff down here was never considered culturally, like Yugoslavia and all of the countries it was broken up into. And we can still see the after effects of these cultural inconsiderations to this day, and these didn't even really have a lot of external influence on them. This just kind of naturally happened after the collapse of Austria-Hungary. We can still see that the Kosovos and the Serbs are still at each other's throats and take any chance to try and kill each other because of the cultural inconsiderations that borders always never account for. And so to act like what happened in Syria and Iraq is unfair, I just historically, with the precedents that have been laid out in Europe alone, it's just really hard to say that, because this is something that's happened everywhere. That's why there was a thing like Czechoslovakia for a good while. Also, we could see that during the Soviet Union's time, they literally chopped off a small part of Slovakia, well, Czechoslovakia at the time, that includes the town of Uzhhorod, and they gave it to Ukraine. We can also see other things like that occurring in Romania, which this area pretty much encompassing everywhere west of the Transylvania mountain range, or the Carpathians, if you'd like to call it that. That's really supposed to be Hungarian, but it's not. It's Romanian. So I mean, like, there's a lot of borders that don't make a lot of sense. In fact, Switzerland, in its own right, it could be divided up amongst the Italians, the French, and the Germans, depending on what language they speak and what they really align with culturally. So it's really tough for me to say that. I know that's kind of the going thing right now, to say that the British and the French really screwed over the Kurds, but in the end, the Ottomans were kind of screwing over the Kurds before anyone even got there. So with that, I hope that kind of explains my side of things, because if we're going to rat on the British and the French for doing what they did, dividing up Syria and Iraq, we should rat on the Ottomans equally for owning the entire area as one country, the Ottoman Empire, and the Kurds were encompassed within its entire border. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, or at least address your side. I do get where you're coming from, though, but I still think with all the other border anomalies culturally around the world, it's really hard to say that that one is out of the norm compared to what's even happening in Europe. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
Next up, we have a $10 super chat from Compound David, who says, what do you make of Russia not paying troops their sign-on bonuses and pay? Seems like a lot of deserters, diminishing Russia's ability to fight.
That is a good question, and I feel like the large part of them not paying the bonuses, which I really haven't heard a lot about, so this is based off of the assumption that that is true, because I haven't really heard about this. It may be demoralizing to Russian soldiers, because it's kind of like when the U.S. Army and their recruiters, because the U.S. Army does something similar. They will eventually pay you, but it's not when you think it is. It's not the way the recruiters say. Because the recruiters will be like, hey, we're taking on welders. We're going to give you a $20,000 sign-on bonus. And the way that's worded is that you would think as soon as you sign the contract, you'll get the $20,000, but it doesn't work like that. And so, a lot of people sign up for like a 4-year and 8-year contract in the U.S. military. And I'm not saying this off of just what I'm assuming. I actually had a friend that this happened to. And they think they're getting that $20,000 instantly, and it's been... The last time I checked with them, it had been a whole year, and they had still not gotten the sign-on bonus. So with that, I could say that that's probably a very demoralizing thing, and if soldiers are facing that in mass, that may be leading to mass desertions. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. I don't really know a lot about the particular situation, but I do know that that's happened to someone I know here in the U.S. with the U.S. Army, and that pissed them off a pretty good bit. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Big Tex, who says, Michael Bolton's got a case of the Mondays.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I don't know what that specifically is supposed to mean, but thank you once again for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, I want to recognize a $5 super chat from Notorious GRG, a $4 super chat from Cindy Mitchell, a $3 super chat from R. May, as well as a $2 donation from Junebug. So, thank you very much to all of you for your support of the channel and helping to keep us running. And up next, we have another super chat, this time from Kevin Scott 76, who puts in a $5 donation and says, can you imagine being a Russian young man in the military because it's expected of you, sent to fight, but you don't want to, and you die horribly?
I could understand that a pretty good bit. It's something that's happened through a lot of history. Not to make this long, because due to the things that have been going on in the background, Matthew has to get up incredibly early tomorrow. So I'm trying to cut through these and make sure that they're a little bit short. Depending on if they're okay with it being said, I might tell you what's going on tomorrow, or if not, never. But With the Chinese Civil War, that was kind of the same thing. Both sides would pretty much chain up local villagers and take them into the army. And so it's been a common thing through history that people who didn't really want to fight were forced to fight. And you can imagine that the Russian soldiers who were sent are not happy with this whatsoever. And the ones who were conscripts that were forced into signing a contract and then sent into this war, you can imagine how they're feeling and how their families feel if they ever find out. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. Certainly that's something to consider, is putting yourself into some of these Russian soldiers' shoes, but at the same time, we've seen so many of them commit atrocities that it's really hard to feel like they're a sympathetic group anymore. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, Ashley believes she has decoded today's message. She puts in a $10 donation and says, I had fun decoding today's message. Russian depot near repair shop in Kievsky.
Congratulations, Ashley. You are the first one to decipher the Enigma code. That's actually something that would have been a big deal in the 40s, but nowadays it's it's not that big of a deal. But still, I'm blown away that someone actually deciphered that. And so you got it correct. There is actually a depot near a repair shop in Kievsky. And we will be looking into expanding out our Enigma code and the ciphers and all of that stuff in the future, now that we see that people are actually able to decipher it. We may actually start changing up the Morse code and come up with different ways to do things like that, because honestly, I think it would be cool, it would be fun, and it would actually make it worthwhile to do rather than just for the fun of it. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Ashley, and thank you so much for figuring it out. You have deciphered the literal Enigma code. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, being an Elite Spring Army member, and one of our Morse decoders, because that was actually a code. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and everyone give a huge round of applause and a huge congratulations to Ashley for being our Alan Turing. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from Wayne's World of Science and Technology, who says, watch for evidence of air defenses being targeted. They should be next.
And I thank you very much for the support. And I'm not sure if you're talking about for the Russians or the Ukrainians. If you're talking about for the Russians, air defenses are always being targeted, but hopefully they will be targeted at a higher priority, because destroying those anti-air ground defenses will open up the skies for Ukrainian aircraft to operate more freely. At the same time, though, anti-aircraft defense systems have such a long range, some of them like the S-300s and S-400s have a 240-mile range, that it would be hard for HIMARS to hit some of them unless if it had ATACMS and then started firing into Russia, which is of course against the agreement that the Ukrainians made with the United States. But I hope that does answer the question. Hopefully they will start to go for anti-aircraft systems next, and with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you for the support.
And next up, we have a $4 super chat from Zenjo Liu, I believe how it's said, who says, let's see here. Ukrainian helped China military start long time ago, include air carriers, battleship engines, jet engines, Bison hovercraft, and more. Do you think Ukraine will stop that?
I think they will. Well, it depends, because if they don't get Western aligned, where they're a member of NATO or the European Union, they wouldn't really have an incentive to do that, because that would just economically harm them and not really give them any benefit. So unless if they become Western aligned hardcore, I think they may still continue to supply the Chinese with that, because they have to make money somehow. And morals like that will end up starving out a country, especially with what Ukraine is dealing with. So I'm not really sure. I'm kind of on the fence with that. We'll have to see. So with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. I know it's not really a nice sounding answer. It sounds like the Ukrainians will just do what they have to do. But when you're in Ukraine's situation economically, you have to do whatever is possible to survive. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $3 super chat from Jean-Marc Pagan Owl, who says, get history straight. France, England, and others won World War I. U.S. came after the worst storm.
Let's get the history straight, bud. In World War I, everyone was almost in tatters and about to quit. The British and the French were wondering how much longer they could even go when the United States said they're coming into the war. The British literally came up with a fake telegram, everyone knows it as the Zimmerman telegram, to get us into the war. I mean, like, there's even questions if they didn't give away the Lusitania and it carrying arms, because they had Americans on it, for us to get into the war. Now, that one's a little bit of a huge stretch, and it's more of a conspiracy theory, but still, it's worth bringing up that the British were desperately trying to get us into World War I because they were running out of a willing population and manpower to keep it going, and the French were literally dealing with mutinies across the entire front line since 1917 and on into 1918. And so the fact that any of them could keep on going was highly in question. The United States stepped in at just the right time in World War I, and they had the manpower. The French and the British had the supplies for them to work with, and the rest is history. The only time that the Western Front had any major breakthroughs was near the end of the war, and usually it was during American offensives. So if that doesn't explain that the Americans were pretty much the nail in the coffin at the end of the war, and we would start to see the German mutinies and rebellions that started to occur behind the lines inside of Germany itself, they started to occur after the massive victories that the Americans brought with them came to be in 1918. Not to say that they were the only winning force in the war. I know that they did come in at the end, but it was their freshness and their overwhelming manpower that turned the war to finally end it. It could have gone on another year, and we may have seen the British and the French almost collapse at that point if that did happen. It was a war that looked like it was never going to end without all of civilization itself in Europe collapsing if it wasn't for the United States. And in World War II, you can't even make that argument because the French were literally defeated within a month, and if it wasn't for the D-Day invasions in Normandy by both the British and the Americans, but largely the Americans, France would have never been liberated a second time. And while their military history is admirable, and they've had an incredibly interesting one with the likes of Napoleon Bonaparte and Charlemagne in it, at the same time, they've lost a lot of large wars, like the Franco-Prussian War. They were almost losing World War I if it wasn't for the British and the Americans stepping in. And then they completely lost the Battle of France in World War II. Then they lost against the Vietnamese at Bien Phu. I'm trying to think if I'm getting that right. I think it is Bien Phu in Vietnam. And so while their military history is impressive, if it wasn't for the United States stepping in those two instances, France may have been lost. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. Not to sound like America's always the savior of the world. In World War II, you could largely accredit the bulk of it being won to the Soviet Union because the Germans and the Soviets clashed it out like no tomorrow. But still, if it wasn't for the U.S., the French may not even exist. In fact, they may be communists these days. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. Not to disparage the French viewers here. They, of course, have an impressive military. And I have a large amount of respect for their arms industry and their military as a whole. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat once more from William Allen, who says, got any ideas how a map of the world would look like based on tribal and ideological beliefs? I'm old and retired historian. Too much work to figure it out, but you're young. Do a paper on it. Woo!
Can you reread that first part real quick?
He says, got any ideas how a map of the world would look like based on tribal and ideological beliefs?
Ooh, man, oh my lord, that would be really complex. Man, I mean, like, I could do it. I'll tell you that. I could definitely do it, but it's going to be a really tough one to combat. Because, golly, something like Kashmir up here, who really owns that? Because that hasn't even been figured out to this day. Who really lays claim to that? The Pakistanis, the Indians, or the Chinese? Who really does? Chinese are about out of the equation there, but on stuff like that, it would be really difficult to do, especially with countries like Afghanistan, because you'd really have to get down in the weeds to figure out what tribes are what. And while the Taliban now controls the entire country, or the Mujahideen, whatever you like to call them, there are still tribes that make up each of these areas in Afghanistan, by and large, with slightly different cultures. But I would look into it and see if it was possible, maybe sometime in the future, well after this war is over, because I do think that would be an interesting thing to do. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and an interesting idea. We may look into that well into the future. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, I saw Mark Hodges put in the live chat the second message were the rotor or machine settings, and he said IE reflector equals UKWB.
And that is correct. I'm really surprised that everyone figured that out. And so thank you once again for the support. You did figure it out, and that entire thing was just telling you the rotor settings, the cipher code set, and all that stuff. You know, everything you put into the Enigma machine, it was pretty much telling you. And so with that, thank you all once again for having a fun time with the Enigma code. It was really cool to see that y'all actually broke it, and largely it was because of the cipher. Because if there was no cipher, that would have taken it forever to do, because you would have had to input everything and there's a load of stuff that you can change on the Enigma machine. But still, I thank you all so much for figuring out. That was really cool, and we're going to make sure to keep on doing that because I thought that was just neat. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Kevin Scott 76, who says Michael Bolton, the singer and songwriter, will be singing with the Shoals Symphony in Florence, Alabama this fall, and I will be the cellist in the orchestra. And that is really cool. It's a really small world out there.
Yeah, that is really cool. And if that is the same Michael Bolton, were we able to get confirmation on that?
Yeah, he said the singer.
Oh, he is the singer?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
No, I mean the guy in the live chat is not the singer. He's talking about the singer in the super chat, though.
Oh, okay. Well, that's still cool to hear that you're going to be in that concert, considering we have a Michael Bolton on stream. I'm not really sure from Matthew. I kind of got confused there if he's the singer or not. Maybe he's just another Michael Bolton. But still, that's really cool to hear that you will be the cellist in the orchestra there. That's really cool, and I hope you have a fun time with it. And I might see about going, but Florence is a pretty far ways away from Birmingham. But with that, I hope that does answer the comment, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from B-Lord, who says, Glory to Ukraine from Poland.
Slava Ukraini. To Ukraine, and also on behalf of y'all from Poland. I don't know where you're from in Poland, but I do think it's a cool place. Really neat history, really cool country. Really, I would say the shining moment of Poland was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. A really cool time in Eastern European history. But I hope that does address the comment. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you for being a Lee Spring Army member from Poland. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And for our final super chat of the night, we have a $2 donation from Mr. Lunchtime, who says a couple of bucks for a Choco Taco. And Mr. Lunchtime, I know you were very sad when the news came out that they discontinued the Choco Taco. They shouldn't have done it.
I know, and it's a large disgrace to the entire confectionery and dessert industry that the Choco Taco has been put down. I never even got to taste it before it was put down, but of course, I thank you so much for the support, Mr. Lunchtime, and we're going to put that $2 towards the Choco Taco Memorial Fund. And with that, I thank you once again so much for the support, Mr. Lunchtime. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And to move on to our live chat questions, up first we have a question from James Reyes, who says, Enforcer, with all the negative comments Russia has said about the West, why is it that the Russian elites allow their children to play, study, and live abroad?
Well, that's always an interesting question. It's the same question you can ask about the North Koreans. If North Korea is such a great place and the West is so terrible, then how come Kim Jong-un studied in Switzerland for a while? And how come they actually were found to have gone to Disney World? Did you know that, Matthew?
Say that one more time.
Did you know that Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un went to Disney World with fake passports?
When they do that?
Like in the 80s. I can actually pull up a picture of it because I believe the U.S. Security Services somewhere took a picture of their passports. Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un. Disney World. It may have been Disneyland or Disney World, but let's see. Here we go. Hopefully they have the picture of the passports here. Man,
it seems like it'd be kind of hard to miss.
This is the Express, so it's I'll try and pull this up later and try and get y'all an actual picture of this because it was actually their passports and everything. And it was when Kim Jong-un was a lot younger. So you could still tell it was Kim Jong-un. He hadn't gotten the plastic surgery yet to look like Kim Il-sung. So it all matched out. It was actually real, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I was like, really? And I feel like, I don't know. I'll have to look into that a little bit more, but we're going to look in. We're of course going to circle back on that eventually. Maybe make a video about it if we can get enough information on it. But with that, I hope that does kind of address that in a way that's something that a lot of I guess you could say, second or third world countries do, is that they always say, oh, the West is terrible, and then they end up going to university or living in the West while sitting there and also pretty much condemning it at the same time. It's very hypocritical. But with that, I hope that does address the question in a way. And with that, since we're now into the live chats, we're going to answer 4 more questions for the sake of time, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, why do you think the Russian Air Force has been such a huge failure in the war so far?
Largely because they did not knock out Ukraine's high-tech air defenses at the start of the war, like the S-300s. They knocked out older anti-aircraft installations, and so by and large, Russian aircraft are at the same threat of being shot down that Ukrainian aircraft are at, and so that's why a massive amount of Russian combat aircraft have been shot down over the course of this war, and they have been used to a large amount because they're scared of losing so many aircraft because of that reason. So I hope that does answer the question. We are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Paul Benz, who says, the issue of the Russian tank with poor smoke grenades, do you think that is attributable to having either having to ration rounds or getting down to spoiled round?
I think it may be them getting down to spoiled rounds, or the stockpiles that they've had have been sitting around for so long, like decades, that when they finally get used, they're just faulty. So I would largely have to credit that to either old stores or they've used so many smoke grenades. We haven't seen a lot of them being used in the first place. But if they are being used, then they're getting down to older stocks for them to just straight up fail like that. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Nitish Jaswal, who says, Enforcer, what do you think about India and Russia forming their own banking and exchange system and more partnership in India going away from the West? As an Indian, it concerns me.
And I thank you very much for the question. And also, it's good to hear we have Lee Spring Army members in India. I do find that somewhat concerning, and I believe that that is a political step in a very bad direction for the Indians, specifically considering that Modi has been trying to move India, at least it seemed, towards the West and towards the Western world, because they're not really on good terms. Well, y'all are not really good terms, since you are an Indian, with the Chinese. Y'all and the Chinese getting a lot of border confrontations in the Kashmir region. Of course, their weapons are banned in the area, so it's always down to sticks and clubs and stuff, but people are still being nearly beat to death up there, and it's showing that things are not exactly going well, to say the least. And so it'd be smart for the Indians to align themselves with the West to make sure that they do not get closer to being within a Chinese sphere. But at the same time, they're aligning with the Russians. And the Russians are not the people to align with, because they do not have any kind of additional or exorbitantly high economic power to combat the Chinese with. And on top of that, we're kind of seeing that right now they're aligning themselves with the Chinese. And so the step in this direction may be leading the Indians to get maybe castrated in the Kashmir, I guess you could say, debate of who owns it. And, you know, I'm kind of thinking in my head, this may end up in a future where the Indians have to concede Kashmir to China just for the reason of all 3 countries, India, China, and Russia, kind of ending up politically aligned in the same group. I don't believe that that will happen. I believe that the Indian nation as a whole may reverse course before that does sort of occur. But still, kind of on the fence with that. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. Let me know what you think, because as an Indian, I think you would have a better view of that situation than me. But I hope that does address the comment. And a very good question for sure. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Melissa Harden, who says, don't forget that it is their Cossack ancestry, that makes the Ukrainians so tough and resilient.
And that is true. The Ukrainians as a nation are made up of Cossacks almost entirely. And it's really cool to see that that heritage they are incredibly proud of. And I think it's very good to be proud of one's culture, like the Ukrainians have the Cossacks. The British, of course, have, I guess if you could call it a culture, the Redcoats as their fighting force. The Germans have the Prussians, although they largely just shed all of that after World War II because the certain guy kind of took that and ran with it. The French have Napoleon, and also, just French culture. If you, I want to come up with a specific thing to call the French, but they're just the French, and the British are really just the British. And then the Americans, of course, are made up of pretty much everyone combined. But still, I think it's really cool that their Cossack heritage is something they're really proud of, and we see them still exercising a lot of that to this day, even on the battlefield in their own traditions and what they do there. And so with that, I thank you so much for that comment. It's a really good comment to make about the Ukrainians, and I think they should be about as proud of their heritage as every other country is as well. And so with that, we are on to our final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question?
And the lucky last viewer of the night is Sick Lid, who puts in a $5 super chat and says, Taliban leadership send their children to American medical schools.
And I do agree, they do send their kids to American medical schools, and it's something really funny about a lot of the Middle Eastern countries is that their ruling class, I guess you could call it, because there's almost one in every country in the Middle East and even in Central Asia like Afghanistan, they always end up going to college in America, and then they come back and they say, oh, America's so terrible, and then they'll end up sending their own kids to America to learn and live there for a while. It's kind of funny to me. But still, it's something that everyone does, but it's always ironic, especially with the Taliban, because they are violently, hostilely against the West, but they'll still send their kids to the West. It's just a weird thing. But yes, I do agree that's kind of a funny thing that they do. So with that, we've reached the end of the stream for the night. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover the news tonight. I hope it's been good, and I hope we've answered a lot of interesting questions. And if you are new to this stream, please make sure to subscribe. We do run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war. And in the future, we are going to be once again expanding into videos. They may not be daily, they may be weekly, but we're going to try and make them of higher production value than the first. Better each time, and hopefully very interesting to all of y'all. It may be a special report on something going on in the world right now, or maybe something that happened in the past. We're not entirely sure. It may just be a thing that we work on a week-by-week basis, but still, I thank you all so much once again for the support. And also, real quick, I would like to read off a super chat that was just sent in by Jax. He sent in a £5 donation. Thank you once again so much for the support. And Jax said, D-Day was not largely the U.S., 73,000 U.S., 61,715 Britain, and just over 21,000. Just under half of the 156,000 sent. Lest we forget, peace. And I thank you very much for the support, and that is true. It's just in the terms of beaches. The British, I think, only had 2. The Canadians had 1, and the Americans had, like, 4, I believe, if I remember the numbers correctly, but I'd have to do a little bit of looking into that to make sure. But that is true. And so I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for correcting me on that again. And with that, I thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a great night. And if you're elsewhere around the world, I hope you have a great day. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you all again in another 24 hours at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to report day 161 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you, and have a great night.